Did you know they plan to build over 3,000 wind turbines on Queensland's Great Dividing Range? Over 3,700 kilometres of new haulage roads will carve through old growth forest. Destroying forests for industrial renewables makes no sense. It doesn't have to be this way. The intact biodiverse ranges of Queensland are no place for renewables. Take 2 minutes to learn the truth about the destruction they cause. Go to rainforestreserves.org.au.
For the World Today, this is James O'Neill. Iranian Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei is reportedly relocated to a fortified underground bunker in Tehran amid fears of a possible U.S. military strike, according to Iran International. Sources said the hardened complex includes interconnected tunnels designed to ensure leadership continuity. Khamenei's son Massoud has allegedly taken over day-to-day operations of the Supreme Leader's office, consolidating power within the family. The move comes amid escalating tensions with Washington, weeks of unrest inside Iran, and harsh crackdowns on protesters. President Donald Trump has called for new leadership in Iran and warned of major U.S. military deployments toward the region. Russia, Ukraine, and the United States have confirmed plans to resume trilateral peace talks following 2 days of discussions in Abu Dhabi. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said further talks are expected next week, echoing comments from U.S. negotiator Steve Witkoff, who described the talks as constructive. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said negotiations could resume soon if all sides agree. While progress was reported, core disagreements remain unresolved, particularly over territorial issues. Ukraine continues to reject territorial concessions demanded by Russia, while Moscow claims Kyiv's stance is delaying peace even as talks continue. President Trump announced he is sending border czar Tom Homan to Minnesota following ongoing immigration enforcement operations, protests, and recent shootings involving federal agents. Homan will manage ICE operations targeting illegal immigrants and coordinate investigations into alleged large-scale welfare fraud. The administration says the operation in Minneapolis is its most ambitious to date and has sparked weeks of protests. One Border Patrol agent shot a man in self-defense, and another immigration operation earlier in January resulted in the death of a U.S. citizen. Democratic lawmakers have threatened to block DHS funding over the incidents, while Trump has defended the operation as necessary for public safety. The European Commission has launched a formal investigation into Elon Musk's social media platform X over allegations that its Grok AI generated sexualized deepfake images of women and children. The probe will assess whether X violated the EU's Digital Services Act, potentially exposing the company to fines of up to 6% of global revenue. Regulators are examining whether safeguards against illegal content are sufficient. The investigation follows similar action by UK regulator Ofcom and expands an earlier EU probe into X's recommendation algorithms. US officials have criticized the EU's actions as targeting American technology companies. British police arrested 86 protesters on suspicion of aggravated trespass after they allegedly breached prison grounds at Wormwood Scrubs in London while protesting in support of a Palestine action prisoner on hunger strike. Metropolitan Police said the group refused to leave when ordered, blocked staff access, threatened officers, and some entered the staff area. The Ministry of Justice said security was not compromised, but called the incident deeply concerning. Palestine Action was proscribed as a terrorist organization in July, making support for it a criminal offense. The Home Office said the ban followed aggressive attacks linked to the group, including significant damage to defense-related facilities. Reform UK MP Robert Jenrick criticized Kemi Badenoch for insulting Suella Braverman.
They're very angry that Conservatives are choosing to leave and go to Reform. And they're not engaging with the issues. The same happened to me where the world and his wife piled in, attacking me, throwing insults left, right and centre, but not confronting the actual argument that I was making when I said Britain is broken and the Conservative Party helped to break it. They won't win that argument. They know they won't. And so they're just going for personal insults. It's sad, but that's the way it is. People who really want to fix this country have got to rally behind Reform.
This has been James O'Neill for The World Today.
Father wears his Sunday best. Mother's tired, she needs a rest. The kids are playing up downstairs. Sister's sighing in her sleep. Brother's got a date to keep, he can't hang around.
And then for the defence,
Our house it has a crowd. There's always something happening, and it's usually quite loud.
How long do you think we're gonna stay here for?
Our house in the middle of our street. Our house in the middle of our...
There is a problem with medicine, and we can explain what it is by looking back to the discovery of penicillin. Penicillin, it turns out, was not just an accidental finding. Alexander Fleming discovered that mold he found in a culture dish was killing bacteria, but it took over 10 years before a team at Oxford University were able to isolate the active ingredient. They produced small quantities for preclinical and clinical trials, helping prove the compound was safe and could beat infection. However, they couldn't produce it at scale. In 1941, Andrew Jackson Moyer of the US Department of Agriculture, the forerunner to the FDA, suggested changes to the manufacturing process, enabling mass production. It turns out medicines are not invented when someone discovers a new molecular entity. They are the product of key stakeholders working together collaboratively. Until medicine can be manufactured at scale, it may as well not exist. And in 2025, this is a problem. In the 1980s, pharmaceutical companies began outsourcing production. Suddenly the system was significantly less integrated. Someone with a new discovery today will find themselves disconnected from the rest of the development and manufacturing process. Companies that develop medicine are still happy to work with big established pharma companies, but the modern day Flemings are cut out of the system. The result is far fewer new medicines coming to market. We want to fix this by ensuring the pharma industry builds a more integrated supply chain. We also believe that doctors' expertise administering medicine should be included at the beginning of the process. We know that doctors on the front line have insights about how to repurpose medicine. Doctors should be able to report their findings so that the necessary testing can be completed and they can share their results worldwide. Learn more here and help us take medicines back to the future.
With your help, we can continue to fight for freedom, reach new audiences, and bring important information to the public free of charge. This is not possible without your generosity. Join our quest for the truth and our freedom and donate today, telling it as it is. This is today's News Talk, The World Today.
And a very good morning if you're in the UK. It's 10 after 6. Time to get up. Stop lying in bed and enjoying life. Get up. If you're in Australia, in Queensland, it's 10 after 4, 1976, some would say. In Sydney and Melbourne, it's 10 after 5. So on your way home, so drive carefully. In Honolulu, I would think it's about, I'll tell you why more shortly. One of our guests, both guests are from Honolulu. And a big warm aloha to them too, and mahalo for coming on. There you are. And nice to have your company too. We had a public holiday yesterday, Australia Day. It's where we celebrate protest for other countries, of course. We celebrate other countries. In fact, the Premier of New South Wales, I forgot the country, I think it was it India or something? Jen will let me know. Anyway, he said welcome to their National Day on Australia's National Day. So no complications there at all. We're going to talk about many things in this hour, brand new or an extended format. Still the Protagonists, they'll be there at 5, Queensland time, 6, New South Wales and Melbourne time, and 7 o'clock in London. And then after that, back to our normal one-on-one with our guest programming. So a little bit longer next week. It will even be longer, bit by bit. Now, the big question we're all asking, will Iran be struck by America? Will America attack Iran? And is there a rationale And what are the implications? Now, Major Fred Galvin, who's a US Marine Corps retired major, author of A Few Bad Men, the true story of US Marines ambushed in Afghanistan and betrayed in America. Fred Galvin served for over 26 years as an enlisted and Marine Corps officer, including assignments in the infantry, reconnaissance, force reconnaissance, and Marine Special Operations Command. Now, he led hundreds of combat missions, including raids, deep reconnaissance, ship seizures, and ambush operations in Iraq, Afghanistan, and in the Arabian Gulf, Gulf of Oman, and Gulf of Aden. The Marine Corps selected Galvin to command the 1st Marine Special Operations Task Force to deploy to combat, while conducting a combat mission in Afghanistan. Fred and 6 other Marines were falsely accused of war crimes, which led to the longest trial in Marine Corps history that led to an acquittal. As a veteran of combat missions in the Middle East, we want to find out from Fred and about his book too, and the trauma he went through. We want to find out if he can share his insights on a possible strike in Iran, which seems fairly inevitable. One day Trump wants to, next day he doesn't want to. But there's more to this than just what a president wants. It's the intel that he's getting. First of all, got to welcome to our cameras Major Fred Galvin. Fred, thanks for joining us.
It's great to be back again, and thank you so much again, Mike.
And how's the weather in Honolulu, by the way?
Not trying to be a snob, but it's perfect.
I used to live there. I used to live below Diamond Head in Port Lay Circle. So there you are. I know. And I'm very jealous too, by the way. So thanks very much for reminding me on what I'm missing. Can you tell me, what do you think? Do you think there's going to be a strike from the US, say, on Iran? Or will they still go through a sort of bastardization, diplomacy sort of method, of getting from A to B?
Well, as you laid out in the intro, Mike, very well, I would add. I don't like being ambushed. And I believe right now it appears that the United States and likely Israel will probably be participating in a combined strike, not just against the leaders. Khomeini, as James had mentioned in his introduction, very well, he's gone into hiding. I mean, they're intelligence officials. And if I were still in the intelligence business, that would be something that I'm seeing the winding up. Trump has mentioned that help's on the way. He doesn't want to be ridiculed in this, and he wants to show strength through power. I believe this strike will be devastating. I believe it is, as you mentioned, Mike, and I agree that it's imminent. And I believe it'll be wide scale against military and government targets. Those to include mainly their nuclear facilities again, as well as aviation assets, government buildings, and possibly Navy to include their submarine fleets, which, as we've had USS Ford Carrier Strike Group go, it's officially in the region right now. They don't want anything, especially Iranian submarines, which are known to follow our fleets. That's going to be actively, those are primary targets for our American offensive. And I believe, as I mentioned, Israel and the United States will probably take out a substantial amount of the government and military targets that are listed.
Daniel Davis, deep dive, Daniel L. Davis 1 on X, says, "We are standing on the precipice of a war with Iran. I'm issuing a stark warning about a looming catastrophe. There is a war of choice, not defence, but a reckless war of choice driven by power-hungry elites that ignore the cost of human life." What do you say to that?
I believe there's always going to be 3 sides to every coin. There's going to be some that want this strike, just as Donald Trump, some people say he wants war. Well, he's doing limited and precision raids without boots on the ground, nothing that's prolonged, but it's making the world know that, hey, we are protecting, we as in the United States are protecting ourselves from a northern flank, from hypersonic threat. We are protecting ourselves from Russia as well as China, which are establishing a beachhead in Venezuela. And now we will make sure Iran does not have a nuclear weapon. These are things that we have not seen But do I think it's reckless? I think it's inevitable that Iran will move forward with the development of a nuclear weapon. They will get the technology from Russia, China, anywhere they can to make this a target, whether it's a dirty bomb or whether it's a missile that can attack one of our cities, one of our ships. And we are going to make sure that that does not happen. These are all things that I'm talking about are probabilities. I'm not saying that I have any war plans or I'm talking about anything classified. I would just say that the way Donald Trump has made strong comments in the past, and right now he's doing what he has done in the past and kind of easing off some of those comments, and then all of a sudden we'll see a surprise. I think that same setup is in progress right now, Mike.
What if and there are many reports and surveys and stuff of the people of Iran and how correct they are. I don't know, but you can just take it at you can sort of believe that maybe there's some truth to it. They say 87% of the people of Iran do not want regime change. What's your thoughts on that? And if they don't want regime change, why wouldn't they?
Well, I'm not a pollster and definitely not in Iran because we're not going to get any accurate reporting there. But probably some Israeli intel analysts would have a greater knowledge of that because they're likely on the ground. But with the communication blackout that we're seeing all across Iran, this is something that's, I believe, the numbers of people who have been arrested, been pulled out of hospitals, who've been killed, they're widely varying. But it's to say that there's the preponderance of the people of Iran don't want regime change. Well, I would question that because there's millions of people protesting across 180 cities in Iran. That's substantial evidence, Exhibit A, right there to say that the people want something different. And it's not just because their currency is being devalued and there's economic pressure. I believe they are going against a totalitarian regime and they want change.
Also, reports coming out of Iran that these are manufactured protests, such as what happened in Ukraine. And we're all aware of information operations. Everybody does it. You get out the information that you want to make sure that your country, for example, if it was the US or Australia, whatever, you want to make sure that the West, the people of the West feel like there's some activity, good activity happening. But we all know, if you look back at Bell Pottinger on the war on terror, that a lot of that was just made up. Again, though, to do what it's meant to do, and that's what an information operation is. Not a whole lot of truth to these operations, except they are very successful. The manufactured protest in Iran, which again, it's quite likely to happen if you look at one of the great secret service organizations, Mossad, intel organizations, Mossad. They are very, very good at doing all sorts of things, just same as the CIA or the FSB or anybody. They all do these operations. What have you heard about these protests? Because we're seeing on TV, there's stuff that's been snuck out. But that, to me, it just looks very much like an information operation.
Well, there's some, I know the Germans and others in Europe that think that America didn't land on the moon and that was a big information operation. But one thing for sure right now is the United States and many developed countries have satellites that can look at the imagery, intelligence that's there. There are large-scale protests going on all across the country of Iran. I won't get into anything more because I don't have all that intelligence, and if I did, I wouldn't. But that is not manufactured. This is not subversion by. Now, I'm not saying that countries don't have people on the ground who are trying to conduct psychological operations, trying to conduct information warfare. That likely is in progress, but I do not believe that this whole thing is a giant psyop and information warfare done very well, and that the Khomeini. I do believe that's information. I mean, the Iranian government has put out there as recently as today that there's 3,900 deaths of protesters. So why would the Iranian government say that if there was not, in fact, protests being suppressed, communications being suppressed. This is, I believe, since the 28th of December, this is something that we'll see continue. And it's strong evidence that the Iranian people want something that they currently do not have.
Do you see the Iranian regime at the moment? Are they in control? And regardless of whether they're in control or not, once they have a visit from Uncle Sam, things will change dramatically. Who do you think would replace the regime now?
It's a very good question. There's been several, whether it's Shah's son, who's been looked at and talked about several times, or if the country becomes fragmented into 5 or more, or if it just is fractured and goes into chaos. That is the $1 million question, Mike, is what does the day after look like? How will this, and that's not something that the United States takes lightly or wants to get in the business of, is regime change. And that is what I believe the United States whole of government right now is looking at, is instead of a immediate reaction. This is something just like I believe was planned in Venezuela. I believe that operation was planned for months. And that's something I think in Iran right now, they have people working around the clock at a solution is to, hey, Iran is important because we do not, I mean, they're a largest state sponsor of terror. They've hit us very hard since 1983, attacking our embassy, attacking the Marine barracks in Beirut, Lebanon, but all across the Middle East, from our ships at sea to our Iranian-backed militias training the Iraqis and attacking us in Iran or in Iraq and Syria, the Houthi rebels firing at our ships. You got Hamas and Hezbollah. America wants an end to those attacks, but we also want the threat of nuclear proliferation of a dirty bomb or a missile stopped, and Iran will not stop at that. They say, I mean, they're saying this publicly. They're saying it in the streets that they want death to America, and they say that they're going to, at all costs, get this. It's the same way that Xi Jinping continually talked, like he did in 2023 when he met with Joe Biden in Northern California, that he's going to take Taiwan. These are their stated goals, and when adversaries with that amount of resources and capital from their vast natural resources like oil say something like that, and they're continually determined for that for like decades, since I was a young man, we need to believe them. And it's a threat to the United States. And Donald Trump's not taking it lightly as the president and the commander in chief of the United States Armed Forces.
What about retaliation? Of course, there's going to be some retaliation. How much? I don't know, and you probably have more of an idea than I would. But they would be quite apt, wouldn't they, for a while at operating as small forces, doing some sort of damage as little splinter groups all over the place, because it's harder to knock off 3 or 4 than it is to knock off 3 or 400, or to stop that major conflict. What about the retaliation? How do you see that? Do you see it as I would see it as there will be terror attacks not only throughout that area and on US bases, but I would also and allied bases, but I would also see attacks within your borders?
Well, Mike, I believe that is very correct, and I also know part of history is after the 7th of October in 2021. What was very difficult to get out of the last administration, and what used to be very transparent, was they used to have websites, iCasualty.org, that had how many American service members were killed or wounded in Iraq, or killed and wounded in Afghanistan and in Syria. That was listed, and then it became something that you had to submit a Freedom of Information Act request. And then less than 6 months after the 7th of October, I did see one source, the Military Times, did a Freedom of Information Act request and found that there was 186 attacks with over 100 American casualties in the Middle East following by Iranian-backed militias. So when people say, well, there's going to be retaliation, I'll say this has been going on and it's been severe, and we need to not fight from a defensive. I believe, and I'm not sitting in the Pentagon or in some intelligence community cubicle in Washington, D.C., but I will say, I believe this combined attack with all of our joint services with Israel and who knows if there will be any other Arab states that also participate, but I believe this will be so widespread. This will attack their navy and critical infrastructure as far as their military and government facilities. We do not want, as I had previously mentioned, an Iranian submarine going after the Ford Carrier Strike Group or any other high value targets on the United States side. So I believe that we'll have Air Force bombers again making severe drops on military targets, as well as our stealth F-35s and F-18s taking out fighters and deep targets inside Iran and with Israel too. I think this was going to be catastrophic for Israel.
What about support from other larger countries? And I mentioned Russia, who does a lot of business with Iran, China. Plus, you've got smaller Middle Eastern countries there. And if you look at the history of the Middle East, you would soon realise it's at times hard to work out who's telling you a porky, as we would say, or telling the truth. What about the support of those countries? Would that create what would the ramifications be? Because all of a sudden we're talking about a much greater area and much more severe war. And if you look at wars, I've always been told by military people that politicians fail to understand, and even now, that you can't control war. It's going to go where it wants to go.
Yes, that's a very good question. And because both Venezuela and Iran are key suppliers to China of their oil, this could be something that when you try to see the unseen and the second, third order effects, you could see China go further in bed with Russia, which is something that we definitely need to be aware of. I'm sure people are looking at that. And just like there was after the attacks in Pearl Harbor, there was a Commander Layton, an intelligence officer, who provided for Admiral Nimitz those visionary thoughts of where Japan was going to go next and where our naval forces need to be positioned to safely go after those threats. And that's what I believe somebody of that caliber of intelligence wit is communicating right now to the highest levels in our chain of command in both the intelligence communities, the Department of War, and to the President of the United States. And I believe but this could be something that does drive the great power competition, China directly into Russia much more, as they see that America is serious. They're going after some of these smaller scales of war on a limited scale. And what does that mean for China and Russia? So China really must, just like Japan did 84 years ago, is looking at how they can continue to project power, because they have limited resources in the form of oil to continue to sustain definitely an assault on Taiwan or anything across northern or Southeast Asia.
I just want to get off that because we are running out of time. First of all, I am a great admirer of any soldier that fights for his country, because they sacrifice themselves. It's the ultimate sacrifice, but they do it for the country. You are, and I've looked at your record, were a very good soldier. How did you feel though when you were pinged for war crimes? And sure, you've written a book, A Few Bad Men. And again, we can always look at a particular organisation and say how bad it is, but there's only a few bad ones there. How did you feel? You must have been quite distraught, because you are a very good soldier and you are a very good person.
Well, as one of the phrases that a lot of people have used since the war ended is, we fight for who's behind us, not because we hate who's in front of us. And the book, A Few Bad Men, is just that. It's a few. It's not all. Our government and our military is composed of just exceptional men and women. And I was in an organization that I truly loved those that I served beside and would do anything. And after this war crimes accusation, I continued to serve 7 more years until I hit mandatory service limitations and was forced to retire. And then I went into work for the federal government for 4 more years. But it's just like any organization. I take leaders and I discuss the very first mission of Delta Force in the United States Army, where they had a mission failure in 1980 with their commander, Charlie Beckwith. But, we look at that same organization and how it survived and how they led to the capture of Saddam Hussein. And you look at the SEAL Team 6, how they had a mission failure and 4 loss of lives in their first mission in Grenada. And they went on and captured Osama, or killed Osama bin Laden. So as a leader, you have to look very deep into the future, and you can't, whether it's pain or a loss, you cannot look at those setbacks. You have to understand that it's a far bigger picture than yourself, and it's more important that we continue on and win those future strategic fights, Mike.
This is off script here. Before we wrap this up, within the borders of the US, it looks like it's in turmoil, and then when you look a bit deeper, you will see that this turmoil is a lot of it is make believe, but still turmoil. They're being paid by Americans, and you see that the creative people from say Hollywood, for example, got to leave the US because can't stand Trump. That must disappoint you. I mean, I know you live in Hawaii, and our next guest too lives in Hawaii. And I mean, I was back there last year, in fact, and it was really hasn't changed a whole lot, which is great. But on the mainland, you can feel the tension or the pressure on society. How do you feel when you see, for example, in Minneapolis and places like this, which I believe, by the way, they're a distraction from the serious crimes of fraud committed by various communities there, and you to find governors and stuff will probably end up in court. Don't know if they go to jail. The elite normally don't. How do you feel though when you see the country that you fought for falling apart in areas that's all manufactured?
It's very sad, Mike. I not only see this, I hear it from so many that I served with. And I'll give a shout out to my older sister. She always used to say when we were picking on each other as little kids, she'd say, "Don't you have anything better to do?" And just like here in Hawaii, there's just so much to enjoy and be grateful for instead of, taking up a topic like this. Obviously, the background that I had for a period of time in a government agency doing information warfare, I see this as subversion. This is coordinated. This is financed. And it's just like many other riots that had occurred across America where pallets of bricks appear at a riot. I mean, that's showing a lot of sophistication, coordination, and just like we are doing in other countries where we want to disrupt the governments and destabilize it, that is going on in the United States as well. And it's sad that we have United States government leaders from the municipal level all the way up to the federal level that are supporting this chaos and this subversion, this against law and order. Mike, and that's a question that everyone has to look at is why are we fighting our laws and good order? If we don't, ICE has said, hey, do you understand we're going after this person who's a child rapist? And but it doesn't matter. Some of these individuals are just being led completely off emotion. And that's what people who try to subvert governments and destabilize them, they prey on those who get very emotional, and they can stir that up, and they get very organized, and they use a lot of these same people. They are paid protesters in many of these cases, but it's sad to see that America is allowing this. And as you had mentioned, I believe this is a distraction to the bigger questions of fraud and illegal immigration that is being paid to, and I know it's going on around the globe to overthrow the vote, and so you no longer have a true democracy led. And that's what should be making myself as equal as any of my neighbors, is that we all have one vote. And when you take that away by flooding the polls with people who will from another country that'll be your Pinocchio and you can be the Geppetto, that's not a fair democratic process.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think maybe some of those should experience a couple of weeks on the parade ground with a very angry staff sergeant or sergeant major or something. That would change. I think the change would be fairly quick. Look, if somebody was to find out more about your book or buy your book, which is just stunning, how do they do that?
Well, for the lads down under in the UK, who a lot have had purchased this, probably the best way is through Amazon. It's not available in too many bookstores down there, but they can also instantly view it by ordering it on Kindle if they have an electronic device, such as their phone or a Kindle platform, or they can also listen to it on Audible instantly. It has been sold out several times. It was a #1 bestseller, an award-winning book, A Few Bad Men, and one of the most commonly used terms is it's just shocking. People really can't believe that this actually happened to United States Marines by United States Marines, unfortunately.
Oh, well, a couple of beers later on, box behind the ears just to throw in some bit of oomph might help. But I shouldn't even be suggesting that. Fred, it was great chatting with you. Hope you have a lovely, of course you're going to have a lovely night tonight in Hawaii or Oahu, of course. So great chatting with you. I'd love to do this more. Major Fred Galvin, truly I think, any soldier that serves in their army and they fight for their country in whichever way they do, whether they fight or not, to serve in the military is a great service to the community, and I think people should also be more aware of that and appreciative, because we sometimes forget that they do put their lives on the line for you. Fred, thank you very much. This is The World Today. Coming up next, we'll talk more military from Hawaii.
Growing up, my father enjoyed a drink. It was just part of our culture. So you might have started drinking at 15 or 16. And so then it's just a slippery slope. As it affected me in the end, it was to the point where I couldn't even have money in my bank account because, I'd go to the pub or I'd go to the bottle-o. I started roofing in Sydney when I was about 20 years old. I had a crane come down on us. I jumped off the roof and the crane laid exactly down the line I was running. I could have ended up in a disability or life-threatening situation, and through that I developed PTSD. I medicated pretty heavily. I had a pretty pessimistic outlook on life. The glass was always half empty or whatever it was. You don't realise those things are impacting you so much. It's really hard to walk through the world. Depression and those negative feelings lead to thoughts that, you'd be better off not here. Suicidal thoughts are a terrible thing, You look at what you've given your family, you look at what you've taken away from your family. Dealing with that for extended periods of time and not talking to people about it is something that's probably taken a toll on me and my family that I didn't realise. My drinking got to a point where I was drinking in the mornings and, I had a job, and my boss told me, it wasn't good enough, and I was so lucky that, my boss took me to an AA meeting that night. When you walk into AA, it says on the wall, admit that you can't do this yourself anymore. The second thing is admit that you need God in your life. Having that written there and it just saying, try and turn to the Lord, I thought, well, rightio, now that's my chance. I met Robbie pretty early on. I sort of reached out to him and said, where do I go? And Robbie had been coming to the Salvation Army Church and he said, look, come with me. And we spent a lot of Sundays together. That was pivotal in what I'm doing now. I believe that I was brought here for a reason. I came into the church and I was lucky. There's just so many lovely people here. It's the community as well as the church. One of the members prayed for me. And I think it was in nearly that time that my PTSD was healed and I felt like I belonged in a way. Walking close to the Lord has helped me use my heart more through worshipping the Lord on my own and connecting and drawing him close enough so that he could literally heal me. But when I start to fathom how much healing, glory, there's enough for everyone because that's how it's written, it's never ending. One day after church, I was at home, had an opportunity to see the kids, and my littlest boy was there and he was 8. And he looked at me in a way that he'd never looked at me before in his whole life. That's because I was sort of talking to him differently. I was really lucky to have that moment and to see what could happen if I just keep doing the right things and keep walking with the light. That was something that was pretty amazing. I'm going through a bit of a hard season now, you know, with work and things. I think all I can do is move forward positively. But I really look forward to a future where I can see my kids and my boys grow up. So I really look forward to these next years to live a calm, peaceful life.
What is Australia's deadliest predator? The one that hits with more than 30 Gs of force. Strikes in under a second. Leaves catastrophic injury in its wake. You won't hear it, you won't see it, not until it's too late. Australia's deadliest predator isn't found in the wild. It's on our roads. Speeding is the killer.
With your help, we can continue to fight for freedom, reach new audiences, and bring important information to the public free of charge. This is not possible without your generosity. Join our quest for the truth and our freedom and donate today, telling it as it is. This is today's News Talk, The World Today.
And welcome back. This is The World Today. I'm Mike Ryan. Nice to have company. New time, extended, actually. No rest for the wicked. Out with the whip, make you work even harder. Now, I don't know if you've noticed that the Commonwealth countries, such as UK, Canada and Australia, seem to be getting very cosy with China. Col Grant Newsham is the author of the recent book, When China Attacks, A Warning to America. He is a retired US Marine officer with decades of experience in the Indo-Pacific, to include serving as Reserve Head of Intelligence for Marine Forces Pacific. Now, Grant is also an attorney with experience in international trade and international law, so he knows what he's talking about. The relationship between the US and its allies appear to have soured somewhat in 2026. It's only a month into it, give me a break. Several countries have taken Trump's tariffs and other threats to heart instead of grasping the opportunities to negotiate radically lower trade barriers. Let's attack Trump instead. Should the US be concerned about Canada's, the UK's, and even Australia's reset of its relations with China? Some Australian states are actively seeking Chinese funding for infrastructure, including Victoria, which is on steroids for China. And Dan Andrews, Chairman Dan Andrews, the former Premier, is very, very in with the CCP. So should they have this relationship? It's very strange that much like China, the UK, Australia and Canada have rapidly embraced censorship, digital controls and surveillance. Why is this happening at this incredible pace? Let's talk to China intelligence expert Col Grant Newsham on what may or may not be shifting allegiances and what is behind the trampling of values that the Commonwealth countries used to hold dear. And what is at stake if countries fall out of love with the US? Grant, thanks for joining us.
Sure, glad to be here.
What's your views on, because you're very in with many organisations, and you see what's happening, which you make it your business, around the Commonwealth. And we often have discussions, you and I, about China and Australia and its relationship, therefore, with the US. What's your views at the moment? Because Australia, I mean, many Australians are saying, many in the UK are saying too, and I'll get onto that in one sec, but many of the Australians are saying that our country has changed, and it's changed forever.
Well, countries do change. You know, over time, you look at the United States compared to 50 years ago, it's a different place. It's still a wonderful place, but it is very different, and that's every country. But I do, of course, notice the Commonwealth. Canada's just not far away. England or United Kingdom, Australia, and this is different. Today's I'll just launch into Canada because they're so fresh in mind with their Prime Minister Mark Carney. In some ways, he's just it's like a more presentable version of Klaus Schwab, the creep who used to run the World Economic Forum. If you actually look at what he says, and these are guys who, if you look at what they actually say, what they do, they very much are in favor, seem to appreciate something like the Chinese social credit system. And in some ways, they seem to regard the Chinese model of governance as the better option than the sort of the liberal democracies, the human individual rights that they, Canada has traditionally been associated with, taking great pride in. But it become almost a kind of nasty place if you go there and you are seen as an enemy of the government. And you really saw this on display during the COVID lockdowns. If you remember the trucker protests in Canada and how those were treated, very much out of the Chinese Communist Party state playbook. Bank accounts were frozen, censorship, trumped up charges to go after these people, lives ruined. Utilizing all the resources of the state, this coercive mechanism, to go after people who wanted nothing more than to be heard. And you even had the guy who drafted Canada's effectively Bill of Rights or Declaration of Rights. So this is all wrong, and so that's changed. And for some reason, I don't think this is Trump derangement syndrome. I think he doesn't like Trump, but this has been in the works for a long time. And so you have seen a shift. England, something the same. You have, Starmer, gives the Chinese this massive embassy in central London, despite the widespread opposition, the security threats to that. Just goes ahead and does it. He's trying to give the American base in Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean to Mauritius, which means China's going to have an angle on it. Pretty quickly. He's on his way to China as we speak, where he talks of a new golden era, as if there ever was a golden one. So Australia, we've talked about that before, but it's similar. And these, I don't know what it is. It takes a certain type of person who can overlook the nature of the Chinese Communist regime. If you can do that, there's a lot you can do. But if you do, it suggests that you're incapable of distinguishing between, say, the United States and China. And I think there is a fundamental affinity for the PRC. They'll say, well, it's just a big place. We want to have trade. We're not going to give up on security ties with the Americans. But I think there's far more going on. And I think Donald Trump is just a convenient excuse for these people. So I am alarmed. You can have people who are very good friends for a long time, and gradually that shifts away. In fact, I'm hearing talk in quarters where people who really do like our allies saying, well, maybe Canada, Australia, and the UK shouldn't even be in Five Eyes because we just can't trust them. The relationship's gone. So.
I look at the UK, and major audience for us is the UK, and it hasn't been a slow creep. It's been pretty well obvious. We see and you mentioned the super embassy. Somebody last week was saying, but yes, they have their own embassy, and if they wanted to steal information, they can do it other ways, which probably could. But if you plonk a super embassy next to all these cables, it's much easier than having to use other means of obtaining that data. I even look at the media. One of the grassroots organisations or media orgs in the UK is a UK column, and always waving the flag for grassroots Brits. They were there and have been going for a long time. And I've noticed that the amount of Chinese propaganda that they put on, it's incredible. So you see the institutions that have been Brit through and through are changing. Is this alarming, do you think? Not just UK column doing what they do, that was just an example. But is it alarming that the swing away from convention and, say, for example, its allies, and the move towards, say, China, is that alarming for the US?
Well, it has to be. We had taken our relationship for granted, And you've seen it manifest. Say recently, the Americans are going after narco boats, bringing drugs into the United States and also into Europe, and the British refuse to share intelligence with us. But it is a place where the British will say prevent entry for Americans who say things on social media they don't like, and they've been doing that for a while. It's really has become quite a place. Never thought I would see it. I won't say one is kind of embarrassed or should be embarrassed for the police who go out and enforce these these arrests or pressuring, intimidation. People who said something on the internet that they disagree with, and you look at what they've actually said. It's things like, well, maybe you should be able to show a British flag. The cops who go out and enforce this should be embarrassed, but I think they actually kind of like it. And is that it's something you find in some of these other Commonwealth countries as well. So this is a shift. And at the same time, you notice England as well, and Britain, their military has been allowed to lapse where, while it's highly professional, it's at the size where it's kind of close to useless. One hates to say it. So you have there's several things going on at once, and it is a shift away from, what Britain was, a powerful military, a place where individual rights and liberties were, protected. Goodness, they fought off the Germans for a couple of years by themselves. And now it's a place where, I think George Orwell, if he were still alive, would say, boy, look what's happened here. And once again, Canada, Australia, you do have to, look at some of the similarities there as to just how well, opposition or just even free thought is accepted. But the UK is the one that's fresh in mind. I've just written a piece on the Diego Garcia business, which if you look at that, this is not something that an ally does. And you ask who benefits, and it's the PRC. And it wouldn't surprise me if Starmer went to China, or was on his way to China, and was hoping to have two gifts for the Chinese. One of them, Diego Garcia, the other, the embassy. And, with the embassy, of course, some people say, well, you really can't do much spying from there. Well, you can. Particularly if you want to station people who can go out and intimidate, say, local Chinese, sort of bribe British officials and politicians. But also it's ultimately really a sign of submission that that government did not have the nerve to tell the Chinese no. And if you roll over for that, you will roll over for everything. So it's very different than it was. If you live long enough, you can see the difference in how a country has changed.
I think you got that wrong when you said he's going there with two gifts. I think one was Diego Garcia, the other was the UK. Jeff, I mean, why stop at just a little bit? Give them the whole lot. But it's interesting, isn't it? And it is alarming because, I mean, again, it's ignorance, and I suffer from that when it comes to the history of China. We know that there were mass murders and millions were killed. We seem to forget that and think that, okay, maybe they're okay, because if you look at the US at the moment, they have been fairly boisterous on the world stage when it comes to threats or whisking away leaders of particular countries. And then you look at China. China, they're very good at what they do. They haven't started a war yet.
Oh, they've been at war with their allies. Ask the people, their neighbors. Ask their neighbors if they think the Chinese are nonviolent and have no territorial ambitions. Every one of them will tell you that they do. And Tibet, well, that used to be an independent country. What is now Xinjiang, East Turkestan, that used to be an independent country. The Indians were attacked by the Chinese in the 1960s, the Vietnamese as well. Were attacked. The Filipinos under constant pressure. The Japanese can see what's coming for them. The Koreans will tell you, they go back a long time history-wise. They'll tell you they were attacked. Inner Mongolia, well, that used to be something else. This is one of the cliches you hear about China. Usually I hear a lot from businessmen as a reason why they should go risk other people's money there. But the nature of that regime is something that you have to be able to sort of brush away. And if you can do that, I would suggest it isn't just amorality, it's probably immorality on the part of the people who do it. You saw the Canadian Prime Minister Carney. He talks all about about Canadian values. And then he's talking about the Chinese as just a real viable option to the United States. And perhaps the better option is the impression one gets. So he's got his eyes not just closed, his eyes are wide open, but I think he actually likes the Chinese system better. Ultimately, it's one about control.
It is. We are going to run out of time in about 3 minutes, but I just want to ask you quickly, Five Eyes, do you see it surviving? And because you could remove, or the talk is removing Canada, Australia and the UK from that. There's only 2 left. It probably makes more sense having 2 eyes than 5. But is it in jeopardy of just falling apart and not being a entity at all?
You can see it happening. A few things would have to happen. It's not going to happen immediately, but you imagine some situation where the U.S. in particular feels like it has been let down by any one or more of those 3 countries, and you could find that the relationship has changed to the point you just say, well, we love you, but it's over, and we're going to replace 3 of you with the Japanese. The Japanese would be a good candidate for that, but you can see it happening. Usually it takes a couple things to happen. But the fact that I'm even talking about this gives you a sense, really, of just how things have changed. And I don't think it's accidental. I think this is a systematic and thought-out effort by the leaders of these 3 countries and really the people around them who do have a fundamental resentment of the United States, but also, I think, a preference for control. They talk a good game about freedom of this and that, but try it in actual practice. That is something, as I said, I wish Eric Blair, George Orwell had lived to be 160. They could still comment on these things. It's really the human experience on display that we see these places. But to be able to sort of explain away the Chinese Communist Party and its behavior, and to say, well, Donald Trump is just such a barbarian, that takes some real doing. Mr. Trump is, in fact, he's just a New Yorker on steroids. I'm from Virginia, and everyone in New York is like him. But he's a convenient excuse, and these things have been afoot for a while.
Interesting. And 60 seconds, let us know your thoughts of, I mentioned to Fred Galvin before you, retired Major Fred Galvin, your thoughts. You see all this activity within the borders of the US, such as Minneapolis, and it must make you feel a bit, sick to the stomach that you have these groups that are paid by other entities within the US and outside of the US to create chaos.
Oh yeah, well, I heard a little bit of Fred's interview. He's excellent. You should have given him my 20 minutes. But I agree with Fred that you don't have to look close. This is a systematic, coordinated effort by well-funded groups that hate the United States. They're Maoist, Marxist, and are trying to ultimately destroy the United States. It is that simple. You are seeing an insurgency in America, and it is stoked, egged on by the Democratic Party, by too many Democratic politicians who see this as an opportunity to stymie Donald Trump, who they despise because he's Donald Trump. And in the process, they despise the United States, and they want to make sure that he doesn't succeed and that they will step in. But this is, as hard it is to imagine, this is the early stages, some would say far more than the early stages, of a real insurgency against the United States as a democratic, free, consensual government. All about power once again.
Always a pleasure, Grant, to have this conversation. We'll do more later if you don't mind. Sometime next week, I would love that. Talk about Hawaii also more. We've got to do that. If somebody wants to find out more about you, Grant, how do they do that?
Newsham Grant on X. Also, what I write, you can find me on the internet, but what I write is all at the Center for Security Policy. You'll find it there.
Colonel Grant, retired Colonel Grant Newsham, mahalo. Thank you for joining us. This is The World Today. Coming up next, the protagonists with a great panel from all over the world. Again, Grant, thank you very much.
Did you know they plan to build over 3,000 wind turbines on Queensland's Great Dividing Range? Over 3,700 kilometres of new haulage roads will carve through old growth forest. Destroying forests for industrial renewables makes no sense. It doesn't have to be this way. The intact biodiverse ranges of Queensland are no place for renewables. Take 2 minutes to learn the truth about the destruction they cause. Go to rainforestreserves.org.au.
For the World Today, this is James O'Neill. Iranian Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei is reportedly relocated to a fortified underground bunker in Tehran amid fears of a possible U.S. military strike, according to Iran International. Sources said the hardened complex includes interconnected tunnels designed to ensure leadership continuity. Khamenei's son Massoud has allegedly taken over day-to-day operations of the Supreme Leader's office, consolidating power within the family. The move comes amid escalating tensions with Washington, weeks of unrest inside Iran, and harsh crackdowns on protesters. President Donald Trump has called for new leadership in Iran and warned of major U.S. military deployments toward the region. Russia, Ukraine, and the United States have confirmed plans to resume trilateral peace talks following 2 days of discussions in Abu Dhabi. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said further talks are expected next week, echoing comments from U.S. negotiator Steve Witkoff, who described the talks as constructive. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said negotiations could resume soon if all sides agree. While progress was reported, core disagreements remain unresolved, particularly over territorial issues. Ukraine continues to reject territorial concessions demanded by Russia, while Moscow claims Kyiv's stance is delaying peace even as talks continue. President Trump announced he is sending border czar Tom Homan to Minnesota following ongoing immigration enforcement operations, protests, and recent shootings involving federal agents. Homan will manage ICE operations targeting illegal immigrants and coordinate investigations into alleged large-scale welfare fraud. The administration says the operation in Minneapolis is its most ambitious to date and has sparked weeks of protests. One Border Patrol agent shot a man in self-defense, and another immigration operation earlier in January resulted in the death of a U.S. citizen. Democratic lawmakers have threatened to block DHS funding over the incidents, while Trump has defended the operation as necessary for public safety. The European Commission has launched a formal investigation into Elon Musk's social media platform X over allegations that its Grok AI generated sexualized deepfake images of women and children. The probe will assess whether X violated the EU's Digital Services Act, potentially exposing the company to fines of up to 6% of global revenue. Regulators are examining whether safeguards against illegal content are sufficient. The investigation follows similar action by UK regulator Ofcom and expands an earlier EU probe into X's recommendation algorithms. US officials have criticized the EU's actions as targeting American technology companies. British police arrested 86 protesters on suspicion of aggravated trespass after they allegedly breached prison grounds at Wormwood Scrubs in London while protesting in support of a Palestine Action prisoner on hunger strike. Metropolitan Police said the group refused to leave when ordered, blocked staff access, threatened officers, and some entered the staff area. The Ministry of Justice said security was not compromised, but called the incident deeply concerning. Palestine Action was proscribed as a terrorist organization in July, making support for it a criminal offense. The Home Office said the ban followed aggressive attacks linked to the group, including significant damage to defense-related facilities. Reform UK MP Robert Jenrick criticized Kemi Badenoch for insulting Suella Braverman.
They're very angry that Conservatives are choosing to leave and go to Reform. And they're not engaging with the issues. The same happened to me where the world and his wife piled in, attacking me, throwing insults left, right and centre, but not confronting the actual argument that I was making when I said Britain is broken and the Conservative Party helped to break it. They won't win that argument. They know they won't. And so they're just going for personal insults. It's sad, but that's the way it is. People who really want to fix this country have got to rally behind Reform.
This has been James O'Neill for The World Today.
Father wears his Sunday best. Mother's tired, she needs a rest. The kids are playing up downstairs. Sister's sighing in her sleep. Brother's got a date to keep, he can't hang around.
And then for the defense.
Our house it has a crowd. There's always something happening, and it's usually quite loud.
How long do you think we're gonna stay here for?
Our house in the middle of our street. Our house in the middle of our...
There is a problem with medicine, and we can explain what it is by looking back to the discovery of penicillin. Penicillin, it turns out, was not just an accidental finding. Alexander Fleming discovered that mold he found in a culture dish was killing bacteria, but it took over 10 years before a team at Oxford University were able to isolate the active ingredient. They produced small quantities for preclinical and clinical trials, helping prove the compound was safe and could beat infection. However, they couldn't produce it at scale. In 1941, Andrew Jackson Moyer of the US Department of Agriculture, the forerunner to the FDA, suggested changes to the manufacturing process, enabling mass production. It turns out medicines are not invented when someone discovers a new molecular entity. They are the product of key stakeholders working together collaboratively. Until medicine can be manufactured at scale, it may as well not exist. And in 2025, this is a problem. In the 1980s, pharmaceutical companies began outsourcing production. Suddenly the system was significantly less integrated. Someone with a new discovery today will find themselves disconnected from the rest of the development and manufacturing process. Companies that develop medicine are still happy to work with big established pharma companies, but the modern day Flemings are cut out of the system. The result is far fewer new medicines coming to market. We want to fix this by ensuring the pharma industry builds a more integrated supply chain. We also believe that doctors' expertise administering medicine should be included at the beginning of the process. We know that doctors on the front line have insights about how to repurpose medicine. Doctors should be able to report their findings so that the necessary testing can be completed and they can share their results worldwide. Learn more here and help us take medicines back to the future.
With your help, we can continue to fight for freedom, reach new audiences, and bring important information to the public free of charge. This is not possible without your generosity. Join our quest for the truth and our freedom and donate today, telling it as it is. This is today's News Talk, The World Today.
And welcome to the Protagonists, our number 2 of this 3-hour gig today. And great to have your company too. We're going to talk about Donald Trump, just for a change. Trump first proposed the Board of Peace as an entity. Sounds a bit like his golf club, doesn't it? Sorry, I'm just being rude and facetious. I haven't even started. But it's an entity that would oversee the next phase of his peace plan for the Gaza Strip. In November, the UN Security Council approved a Board of Peace as part of a broader plan that included establishing a security force in Gaza. Several European countries, including Spain, France, the UK, Sweden, Norway, and Slovenia, have rejected invitations to President Trump's new Board of Peace, launched at Davos on January 22, just recently. Spain cited the board's lack of UN ties and the exclusion of Palestinian voices. Don't worry about them. While nearly 20 nations like Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Egypt, and Indonesia joined, alongside figures such as Jared Kushner and Tony Blair. Oh, be quiet, I won't say a word. The board promises reconstruction funding, and reforms post-Hamas demilitarization. But critics see it as sidelining multilateral efforts as Gaza faces shortages and 1.9 million displaced are in tent camps. Let's talk to our panel and find out what their thoughts are on Donald Trump's initiative. Does it risk failure due to its structure and membership and now broader objectives? And what real progress is being made on the ground, or are there still fundamental flaws in the plans for Gaza and the Palestinians? My first guest is one of our guests here is Matt Nielsen. He's a geopolitical analyst. Dr. Frank Romano, we love you, Frank, author and Middle East analysis. Hello. And Professor Paul Takahashi, great to have you back again, visiting professor at NYU in Abu Dhabi. First of all, Matt, could you tell us your views on Donald Trump's Board of Peace?
Well, my views are, as you know, as some of you may know, I'm a legal historian, and I always try to go back into history to find some precedents for this. And the interesting thing is, I haven't really been able to find something. The peace board that has emerged is kind of altogether a new thing. The only slightly similar board I found was the Board of Indian Commissioners in the 19th century that was put together by Ulysses S. Grant as a peace policy in relations to the Native Americans and the assimilation, education, and land grabbing that the United States government was doing to the Native Americans. So in some way, there is a parallel to this and the land grabbing that this new board, be it though global in scale, has started doing in view of the Palestinian people. But aside from that, I would say that this is a very new concept in the world of international relations and politics and geopolitics.
What about you, Frank? What's your thoughts?
Well, this peace board, pretty much an imperialist approach, so-called Trump's master plan, but it brings to mind the iconic scene with Charlie Chaplin dancing with a globe from his 1940 film, The Great Dictator. The peace board does not include any consultation with Palestinians and reduces this ongoing catastrophic genocide to like a tourist attraction, to the Riviera of the Middle East, as Trump had said, sort of an investment opportunity. The Board of Peace, to me, makes a mockery of Palestinian possible statehood, self-determination. It's a plan, to me, that erases Gaza's indigenous population, transforming the Gazan Palestinians into like a cheap labor force. That's the idea. To become property managers, to manage their own land on behalf of real estate moguls. Now, this reminds me of the West Bank. You know, we talked a lot about what it was like for Palestinians losing their land to the settlers, but many Palestinians are hired to work on the very lands that were stolen from them, that are occupied by settlers now, and it seems it's sort of the same. There's no mention also of Israel ending the occupation and withdrawing in the charter, no specific mention of it. Now, Kushner, he was a real estate developer. His family is very much of a mogul, real estate mogul, is one of the key members of the board that we're talking about here, the peace board, so to speak, the so-called peace board. He's got close personal and business ties to Israel. It's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy. And many other members of this major council that will be the overseer of the peace board are very pro-Israelis, with a few exceptions. Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law, recently outlined, there's a Freudian slip here, details about the board's development without mentioning any plans for Palestinian self-determination. in a way, we could also say that this whole procedure, including the smashing of Gaza by Israeli forces for the last few years, is sort of designed to entice Gazans to give up and agree with this plan. And I've listened to recent interviews of people who've just left Gaza, some of the doctors and nurses, and they said the Gazans are fed up and they have no way to secure a place for their children and so forth. They're starting to pretty much give up and say, look, we want to leave and so forth. So this is sort of playing in the hands of what Israel, I think, and Trump are trying to do. Now, since the charter for the Board of Peace does not mention Gaza, it's not focusing on resolving the conflict here. It envisages more like lofty goal, I think, of international disputes forum and a place to maybe relegating the UN to an outside role. The executive board, which includes the former UK Prime Minister Tony Blair, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and Jared Kushner, including Netanyahu, will get into the construction of the board, is clearly, again, as I said before, clearly bent toward an Israeli position. The world, this would illustrate what has happened in the world today, I believe. The US and Israel, with huge international businesses and military industrial complex, are pretty much in control of the world. Members of this council will be forced to grovel before King Trump to stay on the board, like alley cats waiting for the meal of garbage scraps. If they step out of line, Trump will get rid of them like he did with Canada recently. So enslaving the world on Trump's terms, or you're out, sort of what seems to be a major theme here. Gaza, according to Trump, will be a test site. Speaking of this forum that Trump has referred to in his critiques of the UN, he says this board is going to be very successful. We can spread out to other things later if this is successful, and that could be alluded to the fact it could replace the UN, or trying to replace the UN and relegated UN as like a service provider. Now, the founding executive council, I won't go into the construction of it. We could do that maybe later, and then the other stages of this board of peace and who the members ending by a military component led by U.S. Major General Jasper as a commander of the International Stabilization Force. Now, what's the motivation then for these countries to join? Andreas Krieg, associate professor at King's College of London, has said joining this council is motivated by access and leverage. I think he's absolutely right. But what he's really saying is these countries are trying to stay in the loop, to change the shape of a post-Hamas Gaza. But there's a huge dilemma here. Either you join the board that seems to envision undermining the UN, or refuse to join. And you've already said, Mike, about the countries that have joined, and we have also 8 Muslim majority countries that have joined this. Those that have not joined, you've also alluded to, in particular France, Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Slovenia, and Spain. They confirmed not to join, and basically saying we don't wish to undermine what we've established with the UN. What are the issues with the UN? Karim Khan, the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, who I've been working with, at least with my complaints against Netanyahu on behalf of the Palestinian people, have rejected the idea of the UN's failure to act decisively in Gaza, as Trump has often alluded to. He says the UN was prevented from acting. It did not choose an action, and that clearly is being played out by the facts surrounding the U.S. vetoes of many constructive ideas to bring peace to Gaza and to the Holy Land. Now, what's the plan? Trump's development plan includes projections to raise the Gaza's gross national product, to create jobs, to create urban centers, industrial zones. We can go into detail later about that, Mike. And tourist attractions to rebuild schools, maybe throw crumbs out to the Gazan Palestinians. We'll rebuild a few schools and medical facilities. But the main thing, as Kushner has alluded to, we're going to support and advocate free market principles that have been so successful, in quotes, in the United States. And he's repeated this, Kirshner, over and over again. So you can really be rest assured he's definitely Trump's boy, and he's definitely Israel's stooge. Now, Trump has said, I'm a real estate person at heart. It's all about location. And he said, location on the sea looks like a beautiful piece of property that we could use for many people. Open it for tourism, exploit Gaza for profit with luxury. He is saying this while Gazans grovel in Gaza for food, sloshing through stagnant water, infested with disease, constantly damp clothes, trying to stay dry and warm, people seriously ill without medication, and babies dying from the sheer cold. Now, I want to tell you this. I'm in a layover right now. I'm in between Paris and the Middle East, and I'm close to Gaza now. And let me tell you, people are saying, oh, this is the Middle East. It's close to Mediterranean. It can't be that cold. These are icy cold winds that are blowing through the Middle East now, and the vicious weather for people living in vulnerable makeshift tents. Now, let's get back to this real estate mentality as opposed to world leadership. Trump's proposal, however, offers no insight into the core issues such as property and land rights, let alone justice for war crimes. And now Trump has argued that the war in Gaza is coming to an end. And he's saying this as Israel forces continue to kill Palestinians and women, children, and babies. Now, Kirshner's background, and I'm almost concluding here, Mike, Kirshner's background, again, we said he's Trump's son-in-law, but his family are traditionally real estate investors. So this plays in the hand exactly what Trump wants. Now, Kushner was selected as senior advisor on Middle East issues to the U.S. president with very little experience in the Middle East. Now he has said that Israel needs to clean up this enclave, forcibly transferring Gazans to Egypt, and if they don't accept, then to create a space in Israelis' Negev, which I just visited in the Kitziot prison in that desolate desert. Now, he says, Kirshner, Gaza's waterfront property could be very valuable. So we see what his priorities are. Now, finally, there has been no evidence that Palestinians or their leadership have been consulted over any of these plans. Amjad Shawa, the director of Palestinian NGOs network in Gaza, said Palestinian civil society and official bodies were not included in these discussions. The reconstruction plan was announced. It won't compensate Palestinians for what they lost and need. Now, the Hamas, of course, has rejected this possibility and saying our people in the Gaza Strip will not allow these plans to pass. In conclusion, finally in France, we say je me trompe. It means I make a mistake. And the Americans made a mistake electing Trump, and they and the world will pay dearly for that. And finally, let's return to the image of Charlie Chaplin dancing with the globe in his film The Great Dictator, where he plays both a Jewish barber and an evil dictator, Hinkel, with the globe dancing being a famous clip of the dictator imagining world domination.
Thank you for that, Frank. Saul, just tell me, Spain, well, just gives your views that Spain cited the lack of UN ties and the exclusion of Palestinian voices. Why did the UN agree to this in the first place?
Oh yeah, well, it was a very dark day in the UN, I have to say, hammering the nail in their own coffin. I would even say, a day that should live in infamy. November 17th last year, when the Security Council endorsed Trump's plan and basically endorsed the creation of the Board of Peace. Now, at the time, of course, the the charter of the so-called Board of Peace wasn't even, hadn't even been prepared yet. It didn't even exist yet. So, that was also, monumentally stupid and ridiculous. But, what, getting to Trump's 20-point plan and the so-called Board of Peace that ostensibly is supposed to, oversee its implementation and make sure that it happens. I completely agree with what's already been said. It is a completely imperialist, colonialist plan for domination. It utterly sidesteps Palestinian self-determination, any kind of prospect of, Palestinians running their own affairs, benefiting from their own natural resources. None of this features whatsoever. And how could it? I mean, look, I really do feel, and I feel very strongly about this, with a lot of pretty much everything that Donald Trump does. Almost, I think we have to make sure that we don't give the whole thing too much credit. Now, that's not to say that, this isn't important. What's happening is ultra important, because this whole initiative, the Board of Peace, quote unquote, and what Donald Trump is doing in strong-arming countries to bend their knees at his will. All of this is doing and could do even greater harm to the entire world and the international system that we live in. What I mean is, I've seen a lot of commentary on the Board of Peace, and a lot of, I'm an international lawyer, and many of my colleagues have already been writing, very detailed critiques of the UN Security Council resolution that endorsed this, and critiques of the Board of Peace Charter and all this kind of thing. Look, all of this, Donald Trump has no overarching serious strategy. Donald Trump is about personal enrichment and enrichment of his cronies, and acting as a mafia boss, and just basically trying to be the emperor of the world. That's what this is about. So I don't, almost like spending too much time going over the nitty gritty and going over the language of the so-called charter. To me, it's almost like a waste of time. It's all a con job. The whole objective, and both of our the other commentators have already said this. The whole objective here is to develop the real estate, make the Riviera of the Middle East, and to enrich his coffers and the coffers of his family and the coffers of his cronies. That's really what this is about. The internet, the ISF, this stabilization force, this international force, has also been mentioned, and there's been talk about some kind of international force to be sent to Gaza already. Already in 2023, people were talking about this. Now, what really needs to happen is an international force needs to go and protect the Palestinian people from the perpetrators of these ongoing atrocities, i.e., Israel. But even putting that aside, so we have this ISF that Trump is envisioning, and it's supposed to consist mainly, at the outset, it was supposed to consist mainly of Arab countries. None of the Arab countries, so they sort of flirted with the idea, none of them really, joined. And then it was supposed to be predominantly Muslim nations, and people were talking about Indonesia and Turkey and everything. But basically, so far, nobody's really raised their hand. And the reasons are very, very obvious, because the whole idea of this stabilization force is to enforce the will of Donald Trump. The whole idea is that, Muslims are going to fight other Muslims, i.e. Hamas, who does not wish to disarm, obviously. The whole idea is that Muslim is going to fight Muslim, while Trump and Netanyahu are lounging around on the poolside of the new Trump Riviera casino, sipping martinis. So countries were strong-armed into voting for this resolution. But when it comes to actually sending troops for this, when it comes to the potential optics of their people seeing their troops, gunfights with Hamas in Gaza. Look, none of these leaders are that stupid. So who knows? I certainly hope it's going to remain that way. Let's see what happens, and let's see how successful Trump is into forcing other countries to bend their knees. But I think there is a very good chance that nothing like what
Trump at least is envisioning is actually going to happen. There's a very good chance that this is all just going to plot. But let's see. I mean, I think it's a very, very dark day, and it's a very dark day that the UN endorsed this. And it's going to be very, very difficult. Practically, frankly, it's going to be pretty impossible for the UN to come around and say, yeah, we're advocates for Palestinian rights. We've always tried to ensure that Palestinian self-determination is ensured, and we are for human rights and international law. I mean, this is, how can anybody take this seriously anymore? And this is a very dark day, I think.
Mats, what do you think the UN's role will be? And it is disturbing that Spain cited the board's lack of UN ties and exclusion of Palestinian voices.
Well, the problem is that the UN, under its current leadership, hasn't really been on place or in place during the last, I would say, maybe 5 years. Guterres should have been the man to hike up frequent flyer miles between the capitals of the countries involved in the different conflicts. Now I'm talking both, of course, Russia, Ukraine, South Sudan, and also, of course, Israel, Palestine. But the man hasn't been seen. It's more of a case of where is Waldo? Where is Guterres? You can't find him. Now, when he's coming to the end of his tenure, he's suddenly popped up again and trying. I don't know if he's trying to save his legacy or what he's doing, but it's blatantly obvious that the United Nations, in its current form, has totally surrendered, and in its place, because nature hates a vacuum. So when the UN has become deplorably lacking in the international arena, the business diplomat of Donald Trump comes in. Now, what Donald forgets, I mean, if you put this real estate framework into it, Donald is trying to act on a diplomatic level as he is when he is the real estate developer. But he forgets that peace isn't just a transaction. Peace requires justice, accountability, a very sustainable security architecture, things that are not easily captured in a real estate deal. And Trump and the Board of Peace is obviously also underestimating the role of ideology, nationalism, and relevant historical grievances. So while it's clear that the UN isn't going to be able to take back any of its lost powers in relation to Trump as long as he is in power, there is also the fact that the UN has become irrelevant because they are the ones who can encapsulate diplomacy and not just the business side of things. So it's a sad fact, but I do not think that the UN is going to come back and reclaim any lost territories, not under the current leadership.
Yeah, I do agree. Could you tell me, Frank, and you might have to really think about this one, who represents the Palestinians on this brand new board?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and I think
dig deep, Frank.
Sorry?
Dig deep. You have to really dig deep.
Yeah, I'll have to dig deep, and I think it'll be in line with what Mats and Saul have been saying, that especially, Mats has been alluded to the lack of leadership with the UN. There really is no leadership, a specific leadership that I can see. There is the one Palestinian that's on the very almost last tier of the board, who will see sort of day-to-day things that are happening, but it looks like his strings are completely controlled by Trump, like a marionette. And so I'd like to kind of piggyback onto that thought, Mike, with what has been just said about the idea of Trump as seeing things through the eyes of an investor and not really as a diplomatic peace advocate, which is complicated, which involves justice, which involves negotiation. Let's take a look at a weak point, and I'm French American, so I can really fess up to this. The American mentality when it comes to providing solutions. Let's just take a look, analogize with when the United States went into Iraq. The United States soldiers and the government and the leaders thought, well, right away, the Iraqians will embrace us as saviors, and we've saved Iraq from that awful dictator, and we're going to bring it into a market economy like ours, supply jobs and money, and everyone's going to be happy. Sort of what happened in Japan in a kind of a different way, not taking consideration of the local mentality. And so this simplistic approach, as Trump sees it as an investor, as a real estate financier, as Saul and Mats have alluded to, going in, we're going to build buildings, we're going to make money, we're going to provide jobs, in spite of the fact, we're going to enslave the Palestinians for these labor jobs, but they're going to live much better now than in these awful tents, and everyone should be walking into the sunset happily forever after. And so this simplistic approach. It's very American, with the money's there, and it's true with the average American, the money's there and the jobs. It's sort of like sugarcoats everything and everything's okay, because there's not much thinking involved with the average American with respect to the environment. Whereas we're in the Middle East here, or even the European environment is far more complex, and it definitely requires, as Mats has alluded to, and Saul as well, it requires diplomacy, justice, thinking things through. It's not just about the bottom line, as the simplistic Trump thinking is. And so I think, this is a major issue, and I think this might give rise to failure. Because just like the United States failed in Iraq, we went into Iraq, thought we're going to change everything around, and then finding, oh my God, they got to skedaddle out of there. And then we saw Daesh and other major, terrorist groups taking over, leaving Iraq in a much worse situation than it was before. So I think the results might be, as I think Saul has said, that it's going to end up maybe failing, and maybe leave the situation worse than it was before. But what is going to be the solution then? Is the big question is what is going to be the solution, and I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, again, they should probably include the Palestinians in this part, but anyway, it's a small oversight there. Speaking of oversights, who's doing the real work? To rebuild Gaza? Do we have good American investment programs here? Do we have BlackRock maybe in these places? Saul, what do you think?
Well, again, all of this remains very, very unclear. I don't think any of the details have been sorted out yet, and that's it's a very common trait when it comes to pretty much anything that Trump talks about in any of his initiatives. None of this is sorted out. I mean, when you look at Venezuela, for example, he whisked off the president, and then he went to the American oil company. So it seems, asking them to shell out billions of dollars in investment, and it seems like he didn't get that far. So I think that's the stage that we're at. I mean, I think at a certain point, there's going to be a gigantic investor conference, and maybe, they're going to try to make a pitch for private investment. I don't see them getting too far. We have to see. But, the other thing is, since the get-go, every time that Israel basically goes in and flattens Gaza and, commits mass-scale atrocities and kills, hundreds and hundreds, now tens of thousands of people, perhaps hundreds of thousands of people. Every time that happens, we talk about reconstruction. And we talk about, the UN going in and, doing the development work and reconstructing Gaza. And then we look at, the Western donor states, the Europeans, and we look at the Gulfy states to see who's going to shell out. But, what's really important here, and both Mats and Frank have said this several times, there's never going to be any sustainable peace without justice. Now, in any shop in the world, you go in, you break something, well, you got to buy it. And it's the Israelis. The Israelis have been going in time and time again, flattening Gaza, committing these mass atrocities. They're the ones who should be paying up, not you and me. Because when we talk about, for example, I'm a Japanese citizen, so if Japan is a major donor to Palestinian efforts everywhere. For sure, Japan is going to shell out a lot of money for reconstruction. That's my tax dollars, yen specifically. So, why is it that we should be paying for this? And Israel gets off the hook again. This is just another, element of the question. I mean, Israeli leaders have to be held accountable in courts of law, down, up from the highest level political and military leaders down to the grunts posting their atrocities on social media. So, I'm not just talking about money when I talk about Israeli accountability, but that's also something that we mustn't overlook. The Israelis have to pay for this. The Israelis have to be held accountable for what they've done, and this is also part of it. But, look, I really, what a lot of this has not been sorted out. None of these details have been sorted out. They just recently announced that this American general is going to head the ISF. But look, what countries are going to contribute troops? I think one very distinct possibility, despite Trump and his cabinet members, and despite the people surrounding Trump having assured the American public that this is not going to happen, I think there's a very distinct possibility that American troops are going to be committed to this, just like they were in Lebanon in the 80s. And we know how that ended up. That would be a monumental disaster for American lives and for American treasure and for American credibility internationally. But when we go back to the UN and the Security Council in November last year, there was a lot of criticism of the Chinese and the Russians for not vetoing this resolution, and they made statements explaining why they did so, and they gave forward some seemingly legitimate reasons. But if you're really playing hardball in geopolitics, and that is what geopolitics is, and if you're the Chinese and the Russians, you're going to step aside and watch the U.S. just get sucked into this. And, treasure and lives get sucked in, losing ever more international credibility by the day. So, strategically, I hate to say this, but strategically, I sort of understand intellectually why they might have done that. I don't have any inside information, but certainly I think that's part of the calculation. So, that's where we are. I don't.
Well, you just have a slight
yes.
problem then. He's just taken up Martian.
Yes.
Matt, the problem is with this at the moment, I can see is that that Israel will be controlling the whole kit and caboodle.
Yes, of course, that's inevitable, and considering the leverage that Israel holds over the United States, that will continue. Even if Trump were to go, I don't think there will be any great reset if a Democratic president were to return to the White House, because the sway that the Israelis hold over the White House and Washington will still remain very strong. Now, I would like quickly to just return to that real estate developer analogy. And if we look at this from a zoning perspective, I just recently this morning read that, pardon me, that America has told Ukraine that we will give you the security guarantees and the weapons you ask for, but in order for us to do that, you have to cede the eastern territories of the Donbass and Crimea to Russia. So once again, there is this idea in Trump's mind probably that zoning dictates what can be built, where, who controls it, and what the rules are. Disputes over land are, I mean, if we think about it, land disputes are also the core to real estate. And most wars, including the Ukrainian one, are fundamentally about territory and sovereignty, which is, if you want to say so, it's about the zoning of nations. So the Board of Peace, which is influenced by real estate thinking, probably will focus very heavily on the land for peace swaps and the DMZ zones and the autonomy agreements and guarantees of access and these kind of things. So the problem is, once again, that these right-of-way zoning agreements, of course, ignores that very human cost of giving up land, that feeling of belonging. But those are feelings which Trump, from his very cost-benefit analysis, real estate developer mindset, doesn't give a hoot about. Never mind feelings, we're looking for that one deal that will give profit and peace. Damned be the people. So I think that mindset in both Kushner and Trump's mind is that the peace board is basically a real estate board in order to create profit and peace, but to ignore the people.
Frank, what do you think?
Yes, I agree. With this real estate mentality and the idea of the land swaps and so forth, I think that it is assumed. Trump assumes that these years of bludgeoning Gaza have brought the Gazan people, in spite of their fighting, their amazing resistance, to their knees, finally to say, "I've had enough. I want to give up. I want a better life. I want to either to leave Gaza or I'll be part of this reconstruction. I want security for my family." And so I believe the overall objective, I hate to say it, of the genocidal objective of Israel is to bring the Palestinians to their knees, that they'll agree to this type of a kind of a zoning deal. I agree with that. It's about land. I think with this mindset, it might give rise to complete failure, because not including the Palestinians, it means that it's the same issue, with groups such as the Irish IRA. All the factions were included in the deal, and finally the Sinn Féin said, we're going to lay down arms. We see it's not exactly analogous, but there is some overlap here, because we decided to work within the political system because they were included in the discussions, whereas the excluding Hamas and other factions is an error, to whitewash the whole situation and making the world think that Trump, as he said many times, that he has found solutions to world struggles, and sort of giving rise to placing his board, the peace board, ahead of the UN, saying, "Look, I have single-handedly found solutions to all these wars without the help of the UN." And so we see now then the illusion is we can do this without the factions, which is a clear mistake, but it's also indication that Trump and his people do not read history, do not take it seriously, and think they're going to make the world in conformance with their vision.
Saul, I'm a little bit confused, which is not unusual apparently for me, so my wife keeps telling me. Wives are always right, especially when you're close by. I'm just a bit interested here and confused. We have, and Frank made the point that the Muslim governments, countries, had supported the border of peace, and the non-Muslim ones didn't support them, such as Spain, who said they would not support it because of the lack of Palestinian voices. Surely that should have been the case with the Muslim governments and countries, because they haven't got a problem with it. And they're going rocketing ahead, and yet we have those non-Muslim ones, especially Spain, saying we're not going to be part of the border peace until you include, which is a good idea, include Palestine itself.
Well, this is a big, broader question about. Oh, sorry. Were you asking me or asking Frank? I'm sorry.
You can all jump in, by the way.
Go ahead.
All right, sure. Yeah, sorry.
Go ahead.
Look, I mean, this is a broader question, I think, about the state of democracy in a lot of, not all, but a lot of predominantly Muslim countries, and how the governments operate and how they want to make sure that they can at least suppress popular dissent or maybe channel it to other areas. So, this is the kind of thing that we see a lot in particularly the countries neighboring Palestine. Egypt is a prime example of that, right? I mean, it's a military dictatorship. And the people, of course, are very pro-Palestinian, and they're very inclined towards Palestinian self-determination. But the government has other ideas, and the government is, of course, very, very closely in bed with the Israelis and with the Americans as well. So, you have these kind of issues. The other thing is, of course, global vulnerabilities of a lot of predominantly Muslim countries, and how they've been able to be strong, how the Americans or Trump have been able to strong arm them. So, that's all part and parcel of this. But really, if we look at the UN as a whole, and the thing is, ever since the UN was created, we look at how the Security Council was designed, and we look already in 1947 at the Partition Resolution, when the UN got together and decided, okay, we have this territory called Palestine. The British are abandoning it. They were given the mandate by the League of Nations after World War I. Now they're abandoning it. They're throwing it back in our faces. Well, our fantastic idea is, okay, Palestinian people, why don't you give over half of your land to these Zionist settlers from Europe? Yeah, we think this is a fantastic idea. This was the first betrayal of the so-called international community of the rights of the Palestinian people, and things have just gone downhill since then, really. So, I mean, I do believe that we have to make sure we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, and we have to try to preserve those bits of the international system that are worth preserving. And things like the International Criminal Court and international human rights are part of that. But at the same time, we mustn't be too starry-eyed about it.
Yeah, let me add something, and then I want to hear what Matt has to say about it. Let's look at the Arab Muslim countries that have joined. Really, most of them, such as Saudi Arabia and Emirates and so forth, have already, in Jordan and Egypt, have already close relationship with Israel and close commercial relationship with Israel. Of course, then we have Pakistan and another country, I can't remember, that are not that close, but we see the strong arm happening. But I want to add just one last thing, and then we'll hear what Matt has to say. When you talk about accountability, to me, it's not just about Israel being accountable to the crimes it's committed and to compensate Palestinians for their losses. They're accomplices as well. And again, since I'm one of the lawyers for the Palestinian people before the International Criminal Court, talking about accountability, who is an accomplice to these crimes? The United States should be very much part of the compensating, because they're without American arms and support, the catastrophic genocide would never have happened. And I'm also European. I'm French American, not to forget that Macron and other European leaders have said on one side of their mouth, oh, we think that Palestine should exist, and at the same time continuing to send arms to Israel. to enable Israel to continue this genocide and continue the destruction. All these countries that have been accomplices to Israeli crimes and war crimes and damage to the Gazan people and their property should be held accountable.
Yeah, definitely agree.
Matt's
the problem with accountability is that they're seemingly the only ones that can hold them accountable are in Europe are the voters and the politicians in Europe. Most of them know that they will get away with this because the media has framed the Palestinian people as lesser individuals. They are not equal to the white people. This is still the colonial mindset amongst the voters in Europe. So Macron can speak with these. He can say both these things because he knows that the voters are not going to hold him accountable. Now, as for the Muslim countries who have signed up, it's easy to see it's just apply follow the money principle. Because in these countries, for example, Egypt, the government of Egypt is intertwined with the military in Egypt. And the military in Egypt is, of course, intertwined with the American military industrial complex. So Egypt knows that there is a killing to be made when it comes to profits, because Egypt knows that they will probably be the main facilitators of raw materials and also perhaps workforces. Saudi Arabia, they know as well that they need to keep daddy happy. They know where the money is at, and Jordan, of course, it's the same idea. Just follow the money. In all these countries, there is a money trail that goes back to a development sector, an energy sector, and a military industrial sector, which keeps the military and the leaders of these countries happy. So that's why they have joined. That's not rocket science as far as I see it. It's just human greed. And since in these countries there is no democracy, they will never be held accountable either. So it's, as always, sadly, the Palestinian people are on the losing end of this board of peace.
Frank, can you just tell me how Gaza will belong to the Palestinians with this new board of peace, given the current plans? So which are they going to, obviously they haven't had much of a say. I mean, how dare they? I mean, they only live there and they bombed and chopped in little bits and stuff, but we're not going to give them a say. So if they're going to rebuild Gaza, where do the Palestinians fit in?
That's a good question to maybe end up on. But Jared Kushner said himself during his speeches about the importance of Israeli cleaning up Gaza and pushing out the Palestinians that temporarily to either Negev or to Egypt, but saying that he's not sure, he doesn't think Israel will let them back in, and then saying he doesn't agree with the idea of a Palestinian state because that simply would be a way of rewarding terrorist acts. So this is, verbatim the propaganda of Israel. So we see what his priorities are, and we see what the priorities of the board are. Well, not that he controls the board, he's a key player in this board as Trump's stooge, pretty much. That the Palestinians will have the bottom line is they will have no ownership of Gaza. They will be placed in a subservient position, but in consideration for a better life. And as that mentality is, of that Trump mentality, like that the U.S. government tried to implement in Iraq. Well, as long as we feed the people and make them comfortable and give them lots of money and a place to stay, it's going to be okay. But fundamentally, I don't think there's any serious consideration that Palestinians, on the one, will have any ownership rights in Gaza. And number two, I don't think there's any consideration there will be a united Palestine, as we see what's happening in the West Bank over and over again, and that, as both Saul and Mats have alluded to, the Palestinians are going to be at the going to be in a difficult situation and with the losers. But I feel, however, sort of contrary to what Mats has said, I have hope and here I am helping to organize another Samud. And so, with a lot more vessels than we went into Gaza or tried to get into Gaza before, where there's always that hope that there will be finally the support of some of the European countries like Spain and Italy. Maybe will escort us into Gaza. Maybe it's idealistic.
And we also have
I really feel that with popular opinion maybe shifting, hopefully, that there will be hopefully a shift with the pressure and the failure of Trump's policy and people realizing his melomaniacal approach is turning so many people off, and there'll be some type of insurgencies within the countries that Palestine will finally find some type of freedom and find some hope to bring their country together.
So, could you just, it was well done, Frank, by the way. Saul, can you just give us your thoughts? Because we are running out of time, gone way over now that we have extended programming. We can't be too lax, but I'm going to because I'm the boss. If you could just tell me your thoughts, and then we'll finish up with Matt's.
Okay, great. Well, look, like Frank just said, I do have hope. I always have hope. I'm a human rights guy, so we always have hope that there will be justice, there will be accountability, and that the good guys will win in the end. I mean, one thing, I lived in Palestine as a UN human rights officer I was there for 5 years, and ever since then, I've gone back many times, and I continue to be in touch with Palestinians and do research on Palestine. And one thing that is always, of course, very amazing and very inspiring is their resilience and their strength in resisting oppression. And so that will, no question, that will continue. I mean, Trump Trump and his cronies are thinking that we've made life so miserable for the Gazans that they're at breaking point, they're going to leave. And no question that, some individuals will, but, as a whole, that's just not going to happen. That is really underestimating the Palestinian attachment to their land and their understanding that they have rights to that land. This whole, getting back to what we've been talking about, this whole sort of real estate developer mentality that, we're going to get the sheriff to come and kick these guys out and evict them from their homes so that we can create, we can tear everything down and rebuild it for as high-end apartments. This is just not going to work. It's just not going to happen. And I do think that, because the popular opinion has shifted so dramatically now and so fundamentally, that the writing is definitely on the wall. And, this whole Board of Peace initiative, I think, will not come to too much. And hopefully it will plots before it does too much damage. I hope.
And Mats, you have the final say.
Okay. The historian I'm not going to be quite as positive as my esteemed colleagues here on this show. Because I too worked in Palestine about 10, 15 years ago now. And the question is, the perspective is the resilience of the Palestinian people versus the fundamentalism of the Jewish settlers and the tenacity of the Zionist ideology. Because what I have seen and what I sadly believe is that the Israelis and the Zionist ideology will not give up until they have forcibly removed the Palestinian from the last vestiges of land that they hold. Because their fundamentalism is, in the end, and from a historical perspective, more powerful than the resilience of a peaceful population, sadly. So unless America somehow changes its allegiance, I am not keeping a hopeful attitude towards where this eventually will go. Sadly, I of course, I hope I will be wrong and that you can say, Mats, you were wrong in 5 years' time. But right now, I am not in a hopeful mood, sadly.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for allowing us to talk with you and you giving us your opinions, valued as they are. Mats Nielsen, Dr. Frank Romano, and Professor Saul Takahashi enjoying the warmth of Abu Dhabi. It's dry, not
Indeed.
like Osaka. You should be happy.
It is very dry now. It's actually perfect weather. It's like under 22 in the daytime.
You need
In
to
the
be
evenings, it's under 20. It's
No,
it's
you gotta
not
be
like in the summer when it's
that's
unbearable.
out.
Yes, indeed.
Understand totally. Gentlemen, thank you very much. This has been the Protagonists, and this is The World Today.
Did you know they plan to build over 3,000 wind turbines on Queensland's Great Dividing Range? Over 3,700 kilometres of new haulage roads will carve through old growth forest. Destroying forests for industrial renewables makes no sense. It doesn't have to be this way. The intact biodiverse ranges of Queensland are no place for renewables. Take 2 minutes to learn the truth about the destruction they cause. Go to rainforestreserves.org.au.
For the World Today, this is James O'Neill. Iranian Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei is reportedly relocated to a fortified underground bunker in Tehran amid fears of a possible U.S. military strike, according to Iran International. Sources said the hardened complex includes interconnected tunnels designed to ensure leadership continuity. Khamenei's son Massoud has allegedly taken over day-to-day operations of the Supreme Leader's office, consolidating power within the family. The move comes amid escalating tensions with Washington, weeks of unrest inside Iran, and harsh crackdowns on protesters. President Donald Trump has called for new leadership in Iran and warned of major U.S. military deployments toward the region. Russia, Ukraine, and the United States have confirmed plans to resume trilateral peace talks following 2 days of discussions in Abu Dhabi. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said further talks are expected next week, echoing comments from U.S. negotiator Steve Witkoff, who described the talks as constructive. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said negotiations could resume soon if all sides agree. While progress was reported, core disagreements remain unresolved, particularly over territorial issues. Ukraine continues to reject territorial concessions demanded by Russia, while Moscow claims Kyiv's stance is delaying peace even as talks continue. President Trump announced he is sending border czar Tom Homan to Minnesota following ongoing immigration enforcement operations, protests, and recent shootings involving federal agents. Homan will manage ICE operations targeting illegal immigrants and coordinate investigations into alleged large-scale welfare fraud. The administration says the operation in Minneapolis is its most ambitious to date and has sparked weeks of protests. One Border Patrol agent shot a man in self-defense, and another immigration operation earlier in January resulted in the death of a U.S. citizen. Democratic lawmakers have threatened to block DHS funding over the incidents, while Trump has defended the operation as necessary for public safety. The European Commission has launched a formal investigation into Elon Musk's social media platform X over allegations that its Grok AI generated sexualized deepfake images of women and children. The probe will assess whether X violated the EU's Digital Services Act, potentially exposing the company to fines of up to 6% of global revenue. Regulators are examining whether safeguards against illegal content are sufficient. The investigation follows similar action by UK regulator Ofcom and expands an earlier EU probe into X's recommendation algorithms. US officials have criticized the EU's actions as targeting American technology companies. British police arrested 86 protesters on suspicion of aggravated trespass after they allegedly breached prison grounds at Wormwood Scrubs in London while protesting in support of a Palestine Action prisoner on hunger strike. Metropolitan Police said the group refused to leave when ordered, blocked staff access, threatened officers, and some entered the staff area. The Ministry of Justice said security was not compromised, but called the incident deeply concerning. Palestine Action was proscribed as a terrorist organization in July, making support for it a criminal offense. The Home Office said the ban followed aggressive attacks linked to the group, including significant damage to defense-related facilities. Reform UK MP Robert Jenrick criticised Kemi Badenoch for insulting Suella Braverman.
They're very angry that Conservatives are choosing to leave and go to Reform. And they're not engaging with the issues. The same happened to me where the world and his wife piled in, attacking me, throwing insults left, right and centre, but not confronting the actual argument that I was making when I said Britain is broken and the Conservative Party helped to break it. They won't win that argument. They know they won't. And so they're just going for personal insults. It's sad, but that's the way it is. People who really want to fix this country have got to rally behind Reform.
This has been James O'Neill for The World Today.
Just tell me if it's in focus or... Is this okay?
This experience has really opened my eyes. When I went to work that morning, I never would have thought that I would end up in a homeless shelter and all of this because of it. You know, the blink of an eye and your life is changed forever. Yeah, when you come in here for the first time, it really is horrible and daunting. You suddenly think, you know, is this what my life has become? There's no soul, there's absolutely nothing here. And imagine coming in here and you've got a child to bring in as well. Imagine trying to make it a home for them because they've got to share it as well. And this is an imprint for their future. So you can see what this place is like. We wander across in my room. As you can see, there's very little space. His bed to make him comfortable, pictures on the walls. That's my own cupboard I can bring in. Well, it's Friday night. It's almost 11 o'clock. There's been a major row or something like that occurring in the other end of the block. I've got nowhere to go to, so I'm here with my son. This weekend, there was a little bit of aggravation. Okay, a lot of shouting and things like that, right? How did that make you feel?
Bit annoyed.
Why did it make you annoyed?
Because of shouting, bad words and stuff.
I really need to get out of this place.
There is a problem with medicine, and we can explain what it is by looking back to the discovery of penicillin. Penicillin, it turns out, was not just an accidental finding. Alexander Fleming discovered that mold he found in a culture dish was killing bacteria, but it took over 10 years before a team at Oxford University were able to isolate the active ingredient. They produced small quantities for preclinical and clinical trials, helping prove the compound was safe and could beat infection. However, they couldn't produce it at scale. In 1941, Andrew Jackson Moyer of the US Department of Agriculture, the forerunner to the FDA, suggested changes to the manufacturing process, enabling mass production. It turns out medicines are not invented when someone discovers a new molecular entity. They are the product of key stakeholders working together collaboratively. Until medicine can be manufactured at scale, it may as well not exist. And in 2025, this is a problem. In the 1980s, pharmaceutical companies began outsourcing production. Suddenly the system was significantly less integrated. someone with a new discovery today will find themselves disconnected from the rest of the development and manufacturing process. Companies that develop medicine are still happy to work with big established pharma companies, but the modern day Flemings are cut out of the system. The result is far fewer new medicines coming to market. We want to fix this by ensuring the pharma industry builds a more integrated supply chain. We also believe that doctors' expertise administering medicine should be included at the beginning of the process. We know that doctors on the front line have insights about how to repurpose medicine. Doctors should be able to report their findings so that the necessary testing can be completed and they can share the results worldwide. Learn more here and help us take medicines back to the future.
With your help, we can continue to fight for freedom, reach new audiences, and bring important information to the public free of charge. This is not possible without your generosity. Join our quest for the truth and our freedom and donate today, telling it as it is. This is today's News Talk, The World Today.
And welcome back to hour number 3, The World Today. And thank you to our guest on The Protagonists, one of my favourite shows of all time. It's funny how the media is changing, isn't it? How independent media is certainly making inroads compared to legacy media. The difference, I think, between legacy media, one of the differences, many differences, but one of the differences is that legacy media, their success is based on the number of listeners or viewers or readers, whereas in the independent or alt media sphere, there seems to be a conga line of assassins wanting to not beat the other person or do better than the other person, but to destroy them. Robert Sibis is a producer, director, and author of films, documentaries, and TV shows, as well as a book publisher and editor-in-chief of Oval Media. Robert made it his mission to convey a new perspective on power mechanics. His goal is to foster active citizenship by providing a deeper understanding of the world through a variety of media. Robert's a keen observer of global media and how mainstream media and alt media, or independent media, plays a role in narrative management and dissemination of propaganda and factual information during times of crisis. We talked to Robert today about his observations of the changing media landscape over recent years and the lack of transparency we see especially in independent or alternative media. Robert, thanks for joining us.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
How is the media, let's forget legacy. Everyone talks about mainstream media, but let's talk about independent or alt media. How has it changed over the last couple of years?
Oh, that's a very good question. I mean, it's really funny because I feel like I didn't change that much myself, but the media landscape changed completely. Just for my story, I think it's important to see that I've been just a TV producer and a producer of creative documentaries, also for theatrical release, and I financed my films with public broadcasters and public funding till 2020. The mistake I made was that we did a feature-length documentary about the World Health Organization, which has been released in 2018, so 2 years before the so-called COVID crisis. And this put me in a position in 2020 of being an expert, and that has been the real problem, because if you just look at the facts, if you try to judge based on the research we did for years analyzing the World Health Organization, we have been considered, let's say, an outsider of the media circus. And from that outsider perspective, I discovered that there was a vacuum which became bigger and bigger and bigger till, in fact, I understood that there are a lot of things to do, and in fact that the alt is in fact the wrong word. The legacy media, are vanishing. They are disappearing from what they did before. In fact, the film about the World Health Organization we produced has been done with the legacy media. If I would do the same film today, if I would have shown excerpts of the film today in social media, they would have been deleted. So I felt like being by coincidence in that position of being a rebel. And a lot of people liked that in 2020, and this is why we got a lot of support. At the same time, we lost a lot of our old, working relationships. In fact, we couldn't work with broadcasters anymore. We couldn't work with public funds anymore because they were obviously not supporting any criticism of the dominating narrative. So this is why I then could see and live the changing of the media landscape.
How important is alt or independent media in Germany?
Oh, that's a good question. It's getting more and more important. A lot of people just don't trust the media anymore.
We've seemed to have lost your audio for a second, Robert. I think we have the gremlins in somewhere between us and Germany. If you can give Mers a quick call to tell him to stop it.
Okay. Oh, is it better now? Sorry.
Much better now. Yes, keep going. Thank you.
Yes. So in fact, the media in Germany, the alternative media is getting more and more important, and the trust in legacy media is vanishing. It's not really surprising because all legacy media are simply reporting the same stories. It's really absurd to see how the left-wing and the right-wing media are, when it's about lying about the big stories to the public, then they say just the same. It is incredible. It is, of course, the same as everywhere, as people don't pay for the content anymore. Third parties take over and obviously control all media. So this is why more and more people would listen to shows we produce at Oval Media, and we had at the time we've been on YouTube, we had a lot of views, more than what I produced in former times for public broadcasters. So it was really shocking to see how much I lost, and it has been shocking to see how much I won. Both has been clearly an indicator of a big disruption. So. And I got individual support also from some people who just came to me and said, "Look, I want to help you in what you're doing. I have a lot of money. I can give you a lot." And this also had never happened to me in my life. As a documentary filmmaker, normally people just know you will lose what you have because you need public funding because it will never be sustainable economically speaking. And there was one guy who said, "Look, what do you need? What do you want?" And I thought he's wasting my time. I think he's playing games with me, but I can still see. And I said, "Look, I want to make documentaries, and it's true that with donations it's difficult to finance, at least if you want to work on the same level as I did before when I worked with public broadcasters. But ideally, I would like to have produce a whole series about the COVID crisis." And he said, "Oh, what would it cost?" And I said, "Look, if I did it for the public broadcast I used to work with, a minor one, that would give, let's say, 100,000 euros for an episode of 1 hour. And if it's 5 hours, I would need 500,000 euros if it would be on the same level. If I would pay people the same and if I would work with the same people." And he said, "Look, I'll give you 600." So I had these kind of encounters which were very surreal, which I couldn't really grasp. And I said, look, everything is disrupted in 20th century. Everything has been different to normal. So why not? Maybe this is how now the world works, and I can fill in a space which has to be filled in.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting, isn't it? Because the private funders of independent media, and people were saying, maybe thinking, well, just talking about, all these creators, or some call themselves journalists, and they're not journalists. They've worked out how to edit and how to lift video from someone else and have a comment. But they're not journalists, they're communicators. And I've got nothing against that, or they're creators, but they are not. Not all of them are journalists. But the problem with a funder, Robert, as you've attested to, is that once they get hold of you, because we all need to eat and have a roof over our head, it's very hard, isn't it, then to shake that fungus off you.
Yes, I mean, I thought that way too. Even at the time, I thought I should be cautious. So I said I would not take any risk. We make a contract in which responsibilities are clear, so no editorial say to the funder. Also, the revenue share concerned just the film project, so it wouldn't be essential. If the film isn't going right or so, I could still, continue to work. It wouldn't hinder anything. It would just create something I wouldn't have otherwise. This is how I thought at the time. But I was wrong. I was completely wrong, and I'll tell you why. But to continue that story, this guy made me then dream, because I experienced always, my whole life, the complete opposite to this. I always met people who said, look, I want to support you, but I don't have that much money. I can do what I can do, but not more, and you have to go along with this or that. And, I'm used to have very difficult situation, financially speaking, and I never heard somebody say, look, if you need more money, just ask me. This didn't exist in the documentary filmmakers world. So of course, then spending time with this guy, he made me dream. Let's say, look, we could build a new television network. We could build, we could do not just a series of documentaries, but even more. It's true, if you have funding, you can do a lot. You cannot do everything, but nearly everything if you have a lot of money. It's really impressive to think about. These are the things. The fun fact is that, I never really thought about what it means if you have money. Because if you have money, you can just meet a professor and get a dossier and understand every fact. For instance, you could, delegate the research to a researcher who would be extremely qualified. These things, as a documentary filmmaker, you used to do everything alone. It's it has its advantages, but of course, you cannot have that big output, which I would have liked to have, because in a time of crisis, there are a lot of stories to tell. I had always this childish dream of living in Germany when the Nazi times start, and I could do a documentary and film what happens. And then you're there. You could, in fact, make a documentary, could film it all, but you just have to pay your living and the living of your team. And that's then the problem, because the Nazis wouldn't found a documentary I would make about them, So, and here we have, of course, not the same situation, but you have a similar disruptive situation, and you have a similar anti-democratic situation, which is touching every field of life in our societies.
But how dangerous? I mean, we're sort of, we're hopefully not getting obsessed or a bit overindulgent, but I think it's important because, we hear from everybody how important independent media is, and how honest and truthful it is. In my experience, I would probably say that's the furthest. That's so far from the truth. It's not funny, because people don't understand that. I mean, and I can tell you that I can't reveal the investors, but we don't work with them anymore. We do not work with them. It finished quite ugly. And I'm not going to mention their names because, especially at this stage, because I wish to stay out of court. But the destruction that these people do to an organisation or to an individual is just dreadful. But I think what it does more, it shows you how little the truth is, or how little the truth is valued, or how little facts or reality are valued. And if you look around at the moment, there are those that are, I'm a trained journalist, I've got all my credentials. And that person is not. That person is up in front of the High Court. Or there are others that that profess to be, I'm one of the great truth tellers, or I'm going to save your life. Do you find that the destruction that these people who are funding people who need money because they need to eat, do you find that the destruction of a reliable source of information disturbing? And how do we get around that? Because, and I'm being very careful here, I'm dancing on coals, because there aren't that many out there at the moment in independent media who haven't got there's like an octopus around their gonads at the moment, and that's telling them that you need to say what I need you to say or follow this particular agenda. And there's some very, very, very big networks in the US, independent networks in the US, they're caught hook, line and sinker, and yet they profess to be the truth. They profess to be the whole truth and nothing but it, and they're not. How damaging do you think it is? Because forget about the creative people. That it's the audience, that loyal audience who believe what that particular person's saying, and a lot of times out of 10, it's just all bullshit, isn't it?
We live in war times, and in war times, information is crucial. There's a famous saying of a general in Prussia, the country that has been here before Germany. And he said, look, each of the soldier could just kill me. They're stronger than I am. And there are hundreds and thousands of them. And they just do what I say. And if I say to them, you have to kill the other soldiers, or you have to get killed, they would do it. Why would they do it? I mean, it's not logical. It is because there is a pattern in their head, there's something they think, there's a social structure which makes this happen. And this social structure, of course, is not free. It is a very tight system. If you are a soldier, you're living in a very tight system, but not just as a soldier, but also if you are a regular citizen in war times. And this is what we are at. Freedom of thinking, freedom of saying is extremely dangerous to political projects which harm the general societies and the general population. And often we have a tendency to think in two dimensions. We think, there's the NATO, there are the BRICS states, there's Russia, and there's the United States, and in fact, there's another level which is, I would even argue, more important. There's a level of war from people who use these generals to manipulate the minds of the people. And I just have to emphasize what Julian Assange said is the most important leak he ever had. It's the unconventional handbook of warfare, the unconventional manual of warfare, where in 2009, the US Army shows how they proceed if they want to attack another country. They go through all levels of society. It can be legal, it can be political, it can be an environment movement, it could be anything, really anything. It could be like the milk products or the media, of course. So just to say, independent media, alternative media, of course, is a battlefield. And you will have players, either players with a lot of money or players with a lot of political importance, who will try to have a power over these people, especially if they have an audience. So if you have Alex Jones or whatever, people who have a big audience in alternative media, they're part of this battle somehow. And so I think, somehow targeted. I don't know how it was for you, but for me, I felt that this was professional. It was, and this I told you, it made me dream. It was in fact a strategy of seduction, and then you say, okay, you can do things, we can become bigger, I can employ people, we have a higher team. He said, look, you should buy equipment for your studios. I said, it's true, it's true, we don't have really professional equipment. So he gave me a loan with no interest. That's amazing, isn't it? So I said, look, it doesn't seem there's so many strings attached to this contract. We took months to choose the equipment, to install it, and when it all was ready, he said, the same guy who gave me this money for the documentary series, said, look, I want to have shares of your company, 50%, and I would just use this loan and the production fund I gave you and you would just integrate it as a share of a company. And initially I said, look, I don't know, I have to think about it. And then I thought about it and said, that's a bit weird. And he, at that very moment, interrupted all communication, which I thought was also weird. And I said I wouldn't do it. And at that time, he wanted to have back this loan, and which in fact was a sabotage in what we did, because we lost months of work, and it was a lot of hassle. And just to give you one example, what I learned is whatever the contract is, whatever the work relationship is, even if you don't give shares away, even in that context, if you have any business relationship, you are in fact more fragile. You are more dependent to that person, because he could always say, look, you didn't do this right, you didn't do that right, or at least use these experiences for defamation, which is important for us as media makers. Our reputation is core to what we do, isn't it?
It's we haven't got enough time to keep going into all this, but I would like to invite you back again in the next couple of next week or so, if not earlier, because I think it's this very serious, and this is not being too close to it, but we call ourselves the media. Legacy media, we basically know who funds them. And so therefore we take it with a grain of salt or a bucket of something. But when it comes to independent media, there are squillions and squillions out there who want to be told the truth. And if someone keeps professing to tell the truth, you have to ask, where are they getting their money to enjoy a comfortable lifestyle? And with that money, do you have editorial control, or are there strings attached? So I'd like to invite you back again very shortly, just to continue that. Robert, just quickly, what do you have on the go at the moment? Tell me, just so somebody can go and start to look at your quality.
Yeah, thank you for asking. It's so I'm producing a documentary series about what we live in a way. But interestingly, I learned that I need to understand the history to see where we are at today. I think the more we forget what happened last year, what happened 50 years ago or 100 years ago, the harder it is for us to judge what is happening right now. And we do, in fact, a documentary series about the financial aspects to a world war. And we create the links between the First World War and what we live today. I think it's one big story, and it's important to grasp where we are at.
Robert Sibis, if somebody wants to find out more about you, how do they do that?
Just please go on our website. This is the only place which isn't censored. It's www.oval.media.
Robert Sibis, a good friend of ours, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much.
We shall chat later on. Coming up next, we'll talk, the Australian government has already stopped a second person coming into Australia. Very interesting indeed, and we'll find out more about that just after this break. This is The World Today.
Makers are facing more travel. When we're on the go, it's easy to go into our own world. Keep your mind on the road.
Our beautiful world is changing, withering, dying by the hands of those who don't value nature, even though we all depend on it for life itself. But there is hope. Together with caring friends, the Nature Conservancy can restore our lands, heal our waters, and save our wildlife with big solutions only nature can provide. But every day we lose more of the places we love, and we urgently need to save endangered lands, waters, and wild species. The actions we take today will determine the tomorrow we leave to our children and grandchildren. The water they drink, the air they breathe, the beauty they experience. To learn more about how you can help protect and conserve our beautiful world, visit nature.org today.
Asthma is a growing problem, especially among children. Asthma affects the quality of life for millions like me every single day. My name is Chris Draft, and I have asthma. And I've spent more than a decade in the NFL tackling asthma on and off the field. Join me in the EPA in helping people control their asthma. Asthma is a lung condition that can be controlled through medication and by avoiding things that can make it worse. 3 steps are the solution to controlling asthma. Step 1, talk to a doctor. Step 2, make a plan. And step 3, get rid of things that can make it worse. Asthma can be tackled. For more information on asthma, log on to epa.gov/asthma.
We're today's News Talk, the world today.
Shane Shaboul is a committee member of the Australian Jewish Association. The Australian Jewish Association, the AJA, was created to fill a void, provide a strong, principled voice for the Jewish community in Australia. The passing of legislation in response to the Bondi attack has disappointed many due to its possible censorship and the power it gives to banning groups that governments do not like. And this is what our next story is about. Whatever happened to freedom of speech? Make up your own mind. Last night we heard that the government has cancelled at the last minute the visit of Sami Yahoud. Now, Sami now joins a growing list of Jewish visitors whose visas have been revoked by Home Affairs Minister Tony Burke, including former Israeli Justice Minister Ayelet Shaked and American technology entrepreneur Hillel Fuld and Knesset member Shmishma Rothman. We speak now to Shane about this recent act of the Albanese government and what lies beyond this. First of all, Shane, thanks for joining us.
Hello, Mike. Thanks for having me.
I just want to play you this clip, if you don't mind. It's a clip of Sami Yahoud, and I just, whether I agree with him or not, first of all, he's not talking about blowing up the world, although he is very volatile, but there's nothing wrong with, in my opinion, my humble opinion, someone having a right to say something, whether you're Irish, whether you're from a Muslim country, whether you're from Israel, or whether you're from Uranus, which our government seems to be from at the moment. I'll play you this clip, and then we'll come back and we'll discuss whether Sami deserved to be blacklisted from visiting Australia.
I've got a few hours until the flight I'm supposed to be getting on from here, Abu Dhabi, on the way to Melbourne, Australia, and I'm willing to get on this flight. I'm willing to spend another 20 hours sat on a plane just to get turned around and detained, just because I will not back down. On the morning of my flight, the Australian government cancels my visa, claiming that I'm going to be doing business operations on a tourist visa, when really Tony Burke, Member of Parliament over there, has said that hate is not a reason to come to Australia. So which one is it? Is it business operations or hatred? The Australian government seemed to be using a pretty legitimate law to ban me for a pretty illegitimate reason. Talking about a bad ideology like Islam is not hatred. I could quote Islam and their prophet Muhammad if you want me to back up my claims. Stating that a Muslim is this or that is hatred, because Muslims are people, and I'm not hateful of people. I just don't like bad ideas. So I refuse to back down in the face of your weakness, in the face of your fake virtues of tolerance and acceptance and protecting people from online hatred. You are a tyrant, and I will not be deterred. We need moral clarity more than ever. It's time for peace through strength. It's time for courage in defense of our morals. And I think I've got a few hours until the flight I'm supposed to be getting on from here, Abu Dhabi, on the way to Melbourne, Australia. And I'm willing to get on this flight. I'm willing to spend another 20 hours sat on a plane just to get turned around and detained, just because I will not back down to this tyranny. I will not back down to being told no. It will take a lot more to scare Sami Yahud.
Well, there you are. And as I said, I don't really care if he's not going to come out and do some bad things. I think he deserves to be heard. What's your views? I mean, by the way, we look at the Adelaide writers. The whole thing went pear-shaped, again because under the guidance or auspice of Malankellis, what his name is, I got his name wrong, the premier there. He didn't want her, this Palestinian writer and advocate for Palestinian rights. He didn't want her to have any say, and didn't want her to be at the festival. Now we have the federal government, and they do lean somewhat towards I'd say Islam, I'd say Muslims, the Muslim countries such as Palestinians. Nothing wrong with that, but I think everybody deserves a right to be heard unless they are, and by the way, hate speech is subjective to the person deciding that you are committing hate speech. What's your views on Sami not being allowed to visit Australia at the last minute?
Yeah, it's interesting. When I was actually just watching what you showed, I did see that online. He was detained. Well, he was denied boarding in Abu Dhabi to fly to Melbourne, but he was literally at the check-in desk at Ben Gurion Airport in Israel when he received the visa cancellation. So he was at that point not sure what to do. But when I actually watched what you just showed, it just reminds me of the late Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin at the time, when he said to Joe Biden, and we're talking decades ago, when he reminded him that we're not Jews with trembling knees today, like we were 80 years ago. And it's rather poignant on today when we actually commemorate Holocaust Remembrance Day, which is today's 81 years since the liberation of the Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration camp. So to me, that's how I sort of viewed that. And what I take from this cancellation is yet again Tony Burke using the powers that he's got to, in the very last minute, cancel the visa of an Israeli who is about to board a plane to Australia to come and speak, and he's doing it last minute. So there's there's no time to appeal it. Now, Sami Yahud, he's a British influencer who now lives in Israel. He was due to come here to run self-defense workshops, a self-defense workshop for the Australian Jewish Association, and also launch his Peace Through Strength campaign, which is all about empowering Jewish communities and allies to stand up for themselves, to respond back to the hate. And we've seen so much hate since the October 7 atrocities. We've seen on October 8, we've seen imams standing in front of crowds and actually preaching hate speech. There's an imam in Sydney, Wissam Haddad. He has called Jews, and I'll quote here, vile people, treacherous people, monsters, criminals, bloodthirsty, and he's made claims about Jews controlling media, finance, and institutions. Now, if only Jews could control the media, we wouldn't be seeing the hate speech that we've seen spread around the media, particularly from our own ABC here in Australia. But he's also preached, "O Muslim, O believer, there's a Yehudi behind me. Come and kill him." So they're the sorts of examples that we're seeing that actually go unpunished in Australia. We've also he's an Australian citizen, but we've also got um, we've got a radical Islamist. He's Palestinian. His name is Mohammed Sharab. He's not a citizen. He has been out there since October 7, absolutely spewing hatred on the streets. He openly declares he is Hamas. I'm going to read some of his quotes. He states and aligns himself with the global Islamist extremist movement to destroy Israel. He advocates against peace, saying, "F your peace, we demand revolution." He's out there with all the chants from the river to the sea, globalize the Intifada, and he himself is up on kidnapping charges, and is still going through the court. So if we're going to keep those kind of people here in Australia, why are we denying someone who's actually coming out to actually give a series of lectures to empower young Jewish communities to stand up for themselves? But the other thing I'd like to point out is if Tony Burke actually attended a Jewish event, he would actually see that no hatred is actually chanted. They're actually quite uplifting. He denied a visa to tech entrepreneur Hillel Fuld last year because for various reasons, under the same reasons that he's coming here to spread hatred. But I've actually heard Hillel speak, and he spoke at a charity launch through Zoom, and it was anything but hatred. It was actually about Israeli entrepreneurship and innovation. So if Tony Burke would actually come to an event and see for himself, he would actually see that those events are not full of hate. But I think it comes back to ideology and protecting his voter base, which is 25% Muslim in his electorate. So we have these laws. These laws existed before the new laws were implemented. But when I contacted my local MP with my concerns, he said the laws are there, but it is subject to the courts. So it's subject to their interpretation. So if you get a left-leaning judge, these laws mean nothing.
Yeah, by the way, the author in Adelaide was Randa Abdul Fattah.
Yes.
Can you tell me, and by the way, it's very subjective, this hate speech, isn't it? I mean, it's like, for example, Tony Burke.
Yeah.
He is inclined to be on one side of the coin. I think this is where this hate speech walks into all sorts of big knives that will chop you up in little bits, because it is subjective to that particular person handing out that ruling. And right. I don't think free speech, and you would agree with this, free speech is free speech. It's not what you want to hear. So if you say we as Australians have free speech, it is meant that everybody has a right to say something, providing it isn't of a really threatening nature of stuff. But if it's hurty words, yeah, so what? We get over it. What do you think the federal government, who are they targeting?
It's interesting because these new laws were meant to start by protecting the Jewish community against the hate and that we've been seeing on our streets and where they led to. And then eventually this would expand out to other minorities. So, but again, it comes back to if you hurt my feelings, suddenly that's not freedom of speech. Now, if you tell me, if you come and say I don't like you for whatever reason, so be it. But if I start saying globalize the Intifada and let's go and kill you, well, that's a different story, and that shouldn't be tolerated. And we also know, even from history, where that kind of rhetoric leads to. If it becomes normalized and part of day-to-day let's say, society, then we know where eventually that can lead, because the bar keeps moving. And Tony Burke himself said just a few weeks ago that these hate preachers and hate groups have actually been operating just below the legal thresholds. So if you can see that the rhetoric is at the level that it is, you should actually be adjusting the laws to suit the current environment. But again, it didn't suit their ideology and it didn't suit their voter base, and hence why they didn't do anything about it until 15 innocent lives were taken on Bondi Beach in December.
Tell me, do you think there's an overemphasis at the moment? People are a little bit, it's like when you release a brand new car or something, everyone looks at it. So this new legislation on hate speech, we have to make sure we uphold what Australians want. By the way, Australians don't want it. But anyway, who cares? The politicians, they're going to rule supreme. They're the elitist. But in doing what they think is the right thing, and I noticed, some of the I noticed a whole bunch of hypocrites. That's what I was about to say. But they all want to do the right thing, stamp out hate speech. It's sort of on steroids at the moment. I mean, where's common sense? Where's in Australia? Australia's had a great, whether you're a Catholic, Buddhist, Muslim, Jewish, Martian, I mean, we all had a lot of tolerance. And if you just look at the old TV shows and stuff, you could throw an egg at someone and they go, "Oh yeah, want a beer?" And that's it. So our society is one part. Society's way of trying to protect all those from this hate speech is, I find, first of all, very hypocritical. But it's not real, is it?
Yeah, it's interesting because, I mean, we spoke about this last time. When we look about how we grew up, we grew up playing with the kids from different ethnicities in our street. We'd go to their houses, and it didn't matter who or what you are. And to a large extent, depending on what part of society you live in, it still doesn't. It's a certain ideology. I suppose it comes back to critical race theory, doesn't it? If I'm talking to you, as I am right now, I don't care what your skin color is, whether you're tall, whether you're short, whether you're male or female, old or young. I could keep going on. But they seem to identify everyone into a category, and it comes back to an oppressor or the oppressed. And so if you fall under the oppressed, then you can yell until the rafters come home. And I think that's where we've gotten to, which is a real shame. But then, at the same time, what we've seen here in Australia since October 7 is totally unprecedented. And I think once you allow that kind of rhetoric and that normalization of hate to take hold, as we've seen, it gets out of control. And it doesn't seem to be temporary. The war has been over for a few months in Gaza, yet every week they're out there protesting this, protesting that. And people like, the imams that I've mentioned, and even, what Randa Abdel Fattah supports is the continuation of this until the state of Israel is destroyed. Now, the state of Israel isn't going anywhere, and it goes from strength to strength. And so what are we going to do? We're going to live like this forever, where our streets are taken over by this kind of hate speech. And then we get to Australia Day and these same people hate the values in which we all enjoy here.
Yep. Excuse me. Barnaby Joyce said we have to vet our immigrants because there are many that are coming out here that spit on this country. And I thought that's a pretty good, and that's one reason why One Nation is rocketing ahead in the polls.
Correct.
And it's making the Conservatives, the Liberals, and even the Nationals, but the Liberals especially, highly irrelevant. And who thought we would have gone along the same path as what's happened to the Tories in the UK? Although we do notice that the Tories are now joining Reform UK. And the question is, do we have a whole bunch of Nationals or the the Conservatives joining One Nation. Wouldn't that be something? Fish and chips. I mean, could you imagine every Friday you'd be fish and chips? Pauline has her way. Sorry, now, if somebody wants to find out more about your organisation, and I think you are, as we would say in Australia, a good bunch of eggs, and I appreciate your time, how do they find out more about the Australian Jewish Association?
Yep. Look us up online, the Australian Jewish Association. You'll find the link there. You can actually, the Australian Jewish Association is growing in numbers as well and support there, and we've got a huge online presence. I think we're the largest of all the Jewish organisations. We're a centre-right group based on traditional Judean values. So have a look at our website and become a member if you want to.
Fantastic. And I've been to a few of the Jewish. My wife used to work for a whole bunch of clothing companies, and
yes,
the word party has been reinvented by you guys. But that's
we do have some very interesting guests that come on a weekly basis as well, and you can look us up and like us on the social media. There's constant posts on what's going on, particularly today about Sammy Yahud.
Yep. Very interesting. I think the federal government, I mean, I don't know if I want One Nation to be running the country. I don't think they will, but I think they'll have a major say. But, I mean, could you imagine Prime Minister Pauline Hanson?
Well, the please explain will come out a lot. But you know what? She's stood for the same values for the last 30 years about protecting Australia and having people who want to be here.
She loves the country.
She does, as do we, exactly.
She calls a spade a shovel. Great chatting with you. We'll do this again, Shane. Thank you so much for your time. This is the end of our 3-hour stint every day now, Monday to Friday. From 4 till 7, it will increase bit by bit. Probably next week it might go for an extra 2 hours. We'll see about that bit. Thank you very much for your company. Have a great night. This is The World Today.